This story begins with the external gods, which for their lives gave rise to the countless universes, called perfect beings. Through endless creation cycles, they indulged in eternity. During this time, they created an immense amount of matter, souls, and laws. Over time, these entities are tired of the endless routine and came up with a new way to enjoy the allotted eternity. They decided to observe the warriors of their creations. The Atarams we considered the destruction of our labors more exciting. Although countless creatures continued to be born and die for the sake of war, it was a necessary sacrifice to drive away boredom. However, the incident occurred. One of the gods was killed by one of his creations while he was watching the next war. Atarams from other dimensions, having learned about this, gathered to observe the world without God. The death of their comrade, caused by his own creations, caused a dispute among the highest gods. Entities completely ignored this fact, but they all understood something, that this could once again entertain them. The power without the owner to the village is the first who will reach her, and this will be another interesting competition among creations. At the same time on Earth, one guy was admitted to the University of Arts Konkuk, who had long dreamed of getting there. His friends could not believe this, because they knew his comrade and his disregard for study. They did not understand how such as Su Ho could take to an art university, while they themselves could not get anywhere. At that very moment, a guy came up to him, who was also surprised that he was accepted into the artist, with which he congratulated him. Lee Yongchul did not know that this guy was so talented, but Singh wanted his congratulations cold. He even incorrectly named the name of the approaching that he was very angry, but the guy did not even notice this. Thanks to Su, his plan to crush the school completely failed, but thanks to Yongchul, he was able to act. The girl sitting aside did not understand why he was still behaving like a child, because they will act soon. In addition, Yongchul is constantly rude to the one who is trying to establish life after the disappearance of his parents. At that very moment, Yon wanted to hit the land, but he turned out to be faster and immediately kissed his knee directly on the offender's face. The guy asked displeasedly why he would not calm down before the graduation, but immediately fell silent, staring at the opponent. Even from a strong blow by his knee, Chal resisted, and a strange smile appeared on his face, although blood went from his nose. He stated that he did not feel pain at all, after which he swung again, wanting to overtake the arrogant guy. The fist flew past and met with a locker in which he was able to leave a huge hole, dumbfounding everyone. Suo could not even imagine what would happen to him if he took this blow to himself. 2 years later, Suu was already a Sortone, and lived an ordinary life that did not foresee anything mysterious. Suddenly, he heard the announcement that all classes in the main building were transferred to the neighboring one. Walking along the street, the guy noticed the gate, inside of which were hunters who were supposed to cleanse them from monsters. Out of the corner of his ear, he heard that it was the D-Rag gates, and the hunters were there a little more than 8 hours. Meanwhile, people from the Association of Hunters continued to ask ordinary citizens to move away, because it is dangerous here. With the advent of the gate, the world has changed a lot over the past 3 years, and no one can say where and why they came from. The gate is a passage to the dungeons, from which, after a certain time, the monsters living inside are bursting. People also began to change, as if from the very beginning they were destined to fight with these monsters. Superpludes capable of using MANHUA appeared. They were called Awakened, who have since cleaned the gates. Everyone thought that this chaos would continue for a long time, but Wu Jinchul created an association of hunters to unite them. Now the world is divided into awakened hunters and unfinished civilian. Singh thought about this while he was in the classroom and worked with a brush, not yet understanding what exactly he was painting. While someone worked like an ant to earn a living, some received a fortune and without moving a finger. This difference quickly made it possible to understand the ants of their limits, because when Yongchul became awakened, he often got from him. It doesn't matter how stubbornly the unforgivable is, it will never be compared with the awakened E rank, although the one and the weakest. The world will come to an end if the hunters do not have time to close the gate, not to survive civilians without awakened, but not vice versa. Therefore, everyone is grateful to the hunters, because thanks to them, the unforgivated people can live on, entrusting them to their safety. However, the guy began to creep in doubt that he slowly gets used to lose control of things. His missing parents, he relies on others for the sake of existence, even when it seems that he is on the shoulder. After he decided everything, he is filled with a sense of helplessness, with which it was difficult to do something. Mom always said that he became like his father, but how would he deal with this feeling? At that very moment, a teacher addressed him, who noticed that the guy today is very focused, but he only painted that he would embrace. The teacher, noticing the ant, decided that it was quite specific. After all, he was more like a humanoid ant, and Sue did not understand why he drew him at all. The ant in his picture was more like a monster, which was created for battles, and looked intimidating. At the same time, hunters began to exit Pervert, who immediately began to meet people passing by. Yes, they noticed that the hunters looked very satisfied, and it seems that they did it. The man in rumpled armor said that the raid was successful, but he also needs to report to the association some news. Then his face sorted out when he added that he had met new types of monsters, which no one had previously met. Such monsters who pour a blue flame from the eyes of the mouth try to bite and attack with claws, although attacks are extremely weak. One of them hooked him, but he was in perfect order, replied that they are still new monsters, which are not known about. After that, he asked the hunter to write a small report on how this raid passed. But at the same second, the wound on the leg of the hunter suddenly flashed with a blue flame that made the man freeze. The two-handed sword fell out of his hands until the surprise worker understood what was happening at all. The guy tried to turn to him, but at the same moment the hunter attacked him, opening his mouth wide, wanting to bite. Other hunters and employees of the association tried to understand what had just happened and why the man attacked the employee. One of the girls noticed a blue fire, just like the monsters in the dungeon, but suddenly he attacked her. Passers-by and workers immediately began to run away in a panic. I tried to get to a safe place as soon as possible. However, some were not able to escape, and they were bitten by zombie hunters who infected everyone in a row. Meanwhile, the classmates of the Sioux began to approach the window, wondering what the noise is happening there. When the guy went to the window, but in shock noticed that people with blue eyes fight each other. Someone compared them to the monsters, while others suggested that next to them there was a breakthrough of the dungeon. They decided whether to run to them or to stay, because you need to wait for the arrival of hunters who should save them. One of the students asked the awakened teacher to do something, but Lim was just Yi-Yang. At that very moment, the dumbfounded Lan noticed how a hunter appeared on the opposite roof, which was about to jump. The guy immediately ordered everyone to run away, but it was too late, because this monster flew into their office with one jump. A pair of students had already fallen dead, while the rest clung to any opportunity to run away. Suddenly, one of the classmates, Sue, could not rise, because of fear, the legs completely stopped holding it. She asked the guy to help, but he replied that he would call the hunters, after which he rushed to the exit. But he understood that he simply left her to die, because it was all that remains for him, as an MANHUA stated. He was angry that he thought about it again, because even in such an emergency, he could not do anything. If he will continue to look for an excuse, then he will not be able to change anything, and at least something needs to be done. Meanwhile, the monster noticed a girl who could not get up, starting to slowly go in her direction. Burning with tears, she understood that this was her last moment, and the zombie had already rushed straight at her, wanting to infect. But at the same moment, he received a fire extinguisher in the face, which he once picked up on the way back. But the guy did not know that he had fulfilled the requirements to complete the secret quest, the courage of the weak. Once upon a time, the guy had a dream. In him, everything was reminiscent of a game where it was necessary to defeat the monsters that became stronger. He raised the level and fought with them again and again, because with each floor it was more difficult to fight with opponents. Since the monsters became stronger, he also had to progress, destroying obstacles. And, after countless tests, he finally reached the top floor, where the final boss was supposed to be. He was very powerful, and even though it was his enemy, he could not help but even have a reverence for his strength. But for some reason, his father turned out to be the final boss, which gave rise to a lot of questions into the land. It is impossible. The sample, deposited in memory, was reflected in a dream. He was strong and reliable, but how he managed to become like that? When the guy grabbed the fire extinguisher, he mentally asked his father how he would act in this incredible situation. The monster received a rather strong blow, but was able to resist his feat because this damage was insignificant. The attacks of unremarkable people who do not have mana do not act on magic creatures, and he acted too recklessly. Suddenly he noticed that for some reason time stopped, and some window that looked like a notification surfaced in front of his eyes. It was said that he fulfilled the requirement to complete the quest, and now he can become a player. Su Ho, in shock, realized that this was the same thing that was in the dream, and now he could not understand whether he was sleeping or not. If he can fight the same way as there is no reason to refuse such a desperate situation. Now it was much more important to protect themselves and surviving people, because they offer him strength to fight. When he accepted the proposal, notifications began to emerge immediately, showing awards for the quest and its characteristics. At that very moment, he received a new quest in which it was necessary to defeat the creation of the flame and raise the level. When he looked at the monster, he found that an inscription appeared above him, an awakened product of the D-Rag flame. Time began to go again, after which he ordered his classmate to run away, and she agreed without hesitation. Now his enemies were two unforgivated and one hunter who turned to a magical creature. Two monsters immediately jumped up, trying to attack him while the guy thought over an action plan. Without wasting time, he threw the fire extinguisher in the face of one monster to briefly distract his attention. When Singhoi realized that this did not help, he immediately waved his fist, asking the owner of this body forgiveness. His blow came out so strong that he threw the monster up, and his face struck the ceiling, leaving him hanging. The notification announced that he had defeated the unfinished creation of flame, and the guy was surprised that he had done it with one blow. Without wasting time, he hit the second enemy with his foot, after which he surfaced in another notification of victory. Its level increased, and the training quest was completed, and after that, the system offered him a reward for execution. He was offered to look at the award, while only one opponent remained in front of him, a D-rank hunter. Now Suho was sure that this was not a dream, but he did not have time to be distracted because there was another enemy. Without wasting time, he rushed forward to attack, only thinking that he really had awakened. However, the monster did not even move when he received a blow and directly in the face, thereby dumbfounding the guy. Suddenly, the creation of the flame was counterattacked, scratching the chest of Suho and forcing his body to burn in pain. Pushing his foot from him, the guy increased the distance to quickly examine his wounds and opportunities for the battle. If he hurts him, then he will turn into a magic creature. He did not want to become so immediately after awakening. Suddenly, the notification announced that a negative effect was discovered, and then longevity was removed due to the effect. Suho in shock recognized this effect, because I saw this window earlier, but at the same time, the monster again rushed into the attack. The hunter tumbled down on the ground, not allowing him to escape or somehow attack, wanting to turn his similarity in himself. If the D rank, which has become a magical creature, is stronger than him, then he is Iyurang, although this is the last thing that now needs to be worried about. Now the face of this monster was a few centimeters from the guy, and he had to find a way to defeat him. At that very moment, he decided to accept the award, because of which his strength increased, and he was able to reject his enemy. A slight increase in force covered so that he would like him with fists, not wanting to be turned. However, even after an increase in force, he cannot overcome it, which means that all available points of skills are necessary. Raising the strength from 14 to 19, Su thought that he had never heard of the awakened, raising the level. After all, the ranks are assigned when awakening, and no one can become stronger than their rank, no matter how hard he tried. However, he does not know who determines the ranks and the unremarkable, because now he had only one goal, to survive. And now he had power to escape from this damned building. For this it was necessary to defeat the hunter. The guy inflicted countless blows to him, piercing his body with his body, trying to inflict as much damage as possible. After a while, a notification of victory surfaced, and its level increased 3 times, which spoke about the strength of his opponent. Surviving on a stone, Suho tried to realize that he had won, after which he began to inspect his hands. Clutching his fist, the guy accepted the fact that he is now also awakened, but he had many more questions. Hearing a scream, Suho immediately rose, because thanks to the awakening, he will be able to save people and can cope with everything. Meanwhile, the monster, located below, ran towards the building where the guy was located, after which he soared up. At that very moment, Su decided to assess the situation outside, and late found that someone was already getting to him. Looking up, he noticed a monster who waved his sword, flying right out of his window, wanting to kill him. It was a hunter of S rank who created a deafening explosion, breaking into the building where Suho was located. The news said that there was a breakthrough at the Konkuk Art University and asked all civilians to evacuate. At the same time, the military arrived at the place, who immediately cordoned off the territory, withdrawing all people. People die, but all they can stand and look, and everyone wondered when the hunters would be. To call a rank hunter in or higher, it takes some time. Even the gate and D rank, some hunters are infected. They could not believe that the hunter of C rank was infected, and now he is a huge danger to others. Meanwhile, the same hunter rose upstairs from the lower floor, slowly walking towards Suho. The guy noticed that this hunter is stronger than the previous one, and he even has a weapon, which complicates the task. However, he had just increased his level, but it was not clear if he had a chance to defeat such an opponent. At that moment, the guy barely managed to dodge when he saw the sword blade a few centimeters from his face. It was like madness because this hunter seemed impregnable, swinging again at him with a sword. With one blow, he cut the fire extinguisher, which the guy was going to defend himself, but this gave him a few seconds to retreat. Due to the explosion of the fire extinguisher, a curtain of fog appeared, which allowed the land to run out of the office. He will not stand against this monster, which is why the awakened is divided into ranks. No need to wait for the arrival of hunters. Suddenly, the monster stopped, paying attention to the roof, where 3 girls stood, which strained the land. The frightened students decided to wait until the hunters did not appear, hoping that they would come as quickly as possible. Suo stunnedly watched this, because he could not have time to help them, but he also did not dare to stand still. Having made several jumps, he decided to get to the monster, realizing that only he could delay him. There was no time to wait for the arrival of hunters, and it was necessary to do at least something in order not to give this monster will. It had to be stopped at all costs, because it is not known how much time the hunters would need to arrive at the place. Suo understood that one blow was the end, so he needs to try to attack, and at the same time keep the distance. He decided that he could not lose, because in this case there is no sense in the strength that he had so suddenly appeared. After waiting for the monster to do, the guy began to fall asleep with blows, but this did not give any results. The monster sharply waved his sword, leaving the wound on the guy's stomach, and the enemy's speed did not decrease, even after his blows. Having discarded the suck, the system announced that he had practically no health, and he is on the verge. The guy thought he was lucky that there was only one health point left, and the system did not want him to lose. He slowly rose to his feet, although he realized that he was not able to fight anymore, but there was nowhere to retreat. His fatigue was almost 100%, but he decided to take the monster's blow, hoping for the last counterattack. The guy did not notice how the measurement over his head cracked, and a creature flew out of there because he was busy. When the monster wanted to attack the guy for the last time, something landed between them and cut off the hand of the former hunter. Suho, who practically lost consciousness, managed to notice the ant, who stood his body. The creature immediately extended a hand and beginning to treat the guy, saying that everything happened due to his sluggishness. Noticing the monster, the ant said that they are the same insects who dared to harm His Highness. With one wave of paws, he cut the monster into two, not particularly straining, after which he quickly disappeared. Meanwhile, the teacher Suho, holding a mop in his hands, tried not to let another monster to himself. At that very moment, the ant at incredible speed destroyed all the infected ones, leaving them no chance of survival. Looking at this incredible speed and cleansing, the military tried to understand what is happening there now. When the ant finished the cleansing, he immediately returned to the land, trying to evaluate his condition and saying that a lot of time had passed. Su did his childhood when he painted a lot, depicting various creatures that were always next to him. At that very moment, a huge ant in a pink robe approached him, who was surprised that the young lord painted him. When he called his name, the guy woke up, trying to realize when he managed to disconnect and where he was now. Then it dawned on him that he was lying in a hospital bed, and next to him was a doctor and a nurse. A little later, Aunt called him. I asked if he suffered a lot, because the trouble came for no reason. She decided that she wouldn't go like that, and she would put reliable bodyguards to him. She wanted to refuse a guy. When he opened his eyes, it turned out that 2 days had passed since that day, and this incident had entailed many victims. A monster appeared, which infects and turns even hunters into monsters, a creation of flame. Despite the fact that the incident occurred in the city center, the Association of Hunters belatedly took measures. And by the time the hunters eventually arrived, all infected by the university were killed, and it is not known who is to blame. The frightened student who managed to survive gave an interview, saying that the monster is simply taken and exploding. When the Sweet turned off the TV and raised himself, he realized that it was still not a dream, and he really woke up. He also remembered that he was wounded, but he managed to survive, when suddenly someone said that Beer had got rid of this rubbish. The guy looked down in surprise, and finding an unusual shadow that was talking to him now. Suddenly, the ant got out of the shadows, saying that it was very glad to see the young lord after so many years. Memories immediately began to come up in memory, like scattered pieces, and he knows this ant very well. This was one of the shadow creatures that was next to him in childhood, and besides him, there was also a bunch of other shadows. Through the tears, Beer said that he crossed the measurement border in order to meet him, and he did not understand why he only remembered him now. The question was too much, for example, why in childhood he lived with these shadow creatures, as if nothing had happened. Previously, Beer was larger, but this is due to the reaction to the consumption of a large amount of energy for the transition between measurements. And when he saw his level, it was outraged that the system dared to lower the marshal to some soldier. The guy also noticed that thanks to him his body became better because Beer was a talented healer. The purpose of his arrival was to remove the seal from the young master. But without him, he coped very well, which was amazing. And it might seem to him a dream, but everything was in reality since he fought with him. The guy became noticeably stronger. The great lord of the shadows. Sleep Jinwoo sealed his strength with his memory, hoping that he would live an ordinary life. Grabbing the ant, Suho in shock began to ask about his father because he should know why he abandoned him. The ant replied that he had not left him but went into space, which struck the guy even more. As it turned out, the Lord of the Shadows wages war on the invaders from the space who want to enslave the whole world. It was hard to believe that his father protects the world while being very far from the ground. Now he is fighting with the gods from the outside, Itarams, preventing them from any way to influence their planet. Itarim send their apostles to capture the world, and along the way, BR managed to overcome many enemies. The appearance of the gates and monsters on Earth probably arose because of this war, but this means that his mother followed him. BR was surprised that she disappeared on the same day as her father, so the guy decided that they decided to fight together. However, the ant could not believe that Madame House was gone, and was sure that these were all the tricks of the apostles. Suo finally recognized the truth. And all this because of the damn Itarims, and his parents cannot return because of them. When asked if he wants to convince his parents, the guy replied that he had been in solitude for so many years. Bear explained that there is only one way. Because of the war, the Lord of the Shadows for a long time will not be able to arrive on Earth. But after the young gentleman becomes stronger, he will be able to find Madame Hej and see her. Suddenly, the ant took the unusual appearance of the key, loudly announcing that it was time to raise the level a little. The guy held in his hands the key to the shadow dungeon, and with it received a new quest, a shadow test. Now he needed to insert the key into his shadow to open the gate into the dungeon and perform a quest. When he did everything he needed, a portal immediately began to appear in front of him, which forced the land to start. Beer and Friendly urged him to enter the dungeon and pick up all the power that belongs to him by right. He still did not believe in the story about space, the war of the gods, the Lord of the Shadows, because it is just nonsense. But even if so, if he can meet with them, only having gained strength, he will increase the level as much as he wants. Looking at Suho, Beer remembered how the dream of Jin Woo and ordered him to go to the ground and destroy the seal of his son. Vladika the Shadows explained that the invasion of Itaremes can affect the earth, so it is necessary to prepare the Suho. He needed to return the sealed forces in memory so that he could protect the earth himself. Otherwise, it allows you to make a decision independently, depending on the situation on the planet. Since the Lord instructs him to act at his discretion, Beer will follow the increase in the level of the young master. The next second, they entered the land of the dead, where the living can enter only by receiving the permission of the ruler. A shadow dungeon appeared in front of the land, which was like a destroyed city, and the sky was covered with purple clouds. At first glance, it seemed to be more like a destroyed city than a dungeon. He did not know why, but this place seems to him to be familiar. But at the same moment, notifications surfaced with the quest of survival. He needed to hold out for 4 hours, while BR advised him to be on the alert, because danger awaits from all sides. The ant said that the test began, but the guy still could not figure out what was happening, while the enemies were already close. Suddenly, the goblin attacked him from behind him, licking his axe, but he wanted an approach in time. In front of him was a goblin intelligence officer, a blow to which did not inflict significant damage, and he was still able to fight. BR warned that he was only one, which means that nearby there should be even more goblins sitting in an ambush. Su decided to kill him until he called the sides of them, while the ant was worried about the security of the Lord. The guy immediately noticed that his name is White. It means that he is weaker than him, or they are equal in strength, and it would be easy to defeat him. At that very moment, he grabbed the axe from the goblin's hands, inflicting a blow to them on the head, not giving him a chance. Pointing to the body of the monster, Suhus thereby proved that he was not an enemy, asking Bura not to worry. He explained that those who are stronger than him, the names are colored. The ant immediately understood everything and did not argue. Suddenly, next to them, there was the sound of the horn, raising their heads. They noticed another goblin who blew into the horn. At that very moment, many goblins appeared in front of them, among which were Centurion and Captain with colored names. Bear really wanted to help him. He is too far from the Lord and cannot restore his mana and must protect her. Especially if he enters into battle, then the Su will receive much less experience, and now the guy had to fight alone. He realized that he had no choice, after which he held out his hand, calling the axe, which he took from the first goblin. After that, the guy rushed to the attack, deciding to first deal with small monsters that did not inspire danger. Singh used the power of the ruler. This skill was written in the window of characteristics, and it was felt as if he had an invisible hand. Having reacted, he caught an arrow, noticing the archers who settled on the roofs to keep the distance. Again, using the skill, the guy sent the arrow back, hitting the shooter clearly in the head, thereby removing it. Bear was shocked by the adaptation of Suho, and the infancy of the young master was like the legend of the birth of a hero. He freely used the power of the ruler, which he inherited from the owner, and there were quite a few problems with this. But this force was created for destruction, and it interfered with a calm life, which is why many children did not accept it. But since the students of Itaremes are trying to invade the ground, the power of the young lord finally returns. And now Suo uses all accessible power to increase its level and destroy the goblins. When his level increased, the guy realized that with the help of the rule of the ruler, he could raise objects weighing up to 10 kilograms. Distributed for this thought, he made a mistake, because he missed a blow from behind, and the goblin drove the blade on his side. Throwing him away, Singh grabbed the wound, while Beer began to worry about the Lord because he was surrounded. His health decreased by 30 units, while the goblins began a simultaneous attack on a wounded guy. Pulling the knife out of the body, Singh with a sharp movement sent him into flight, aiming at the Centurion. At that very moment, the guy realized that he had never felt so alive because he felt power. Meanwhile, the goblins began to attack him from all sides, while the guy's health gradually decreased. Losing his health points, he tried to repulse each monster, not sparing anyone, because it was his chance. After some time, Suho raised 5 levels, and a new persistence skill was open to him. Sitting by Car, the guy tried to take his breath, while the survival timer finally reached 0. Beer had no doubt that the young lord would undergo a test, and he was unhappy that he really did not try to help. At the same second, a notification of the award appeared, one of which was a rune stone with the ability to extract a shadow. The ant was pleasantly surprised that the young lord would receive the extraction of the shadow that his father owns. Suho was surprised that he received the skill of resistance in battle, because in addition to the level system, he could study skills. This system is an improved version that the lord used. Now it serves as an instrument of its stable growth. The guy summed up, thinking that he was unfinished, but it turned out that he was the strongest necromancer, if he was very short. At that very moment, he accepted the award, receiving a rune in his hands, which was supposed to break to master the skill. Without wasting time, he clenched his fist, breaking the stone, and suddenly felt a new force that's seething inside him. This skill allows you to create a soldier from corpses. The extraction of the shadow is the basis of the strength of the shadow ruler, the dream of Jinwoo. But in order to control the corpses, they must first be obtained, which means that he can control those who are weaker than him. Su heard that the call skills are low among hunters, after which he tried to extract a shadow from the goblin. The system asked to appoint a team to extract the shadow, which made the guy think a lot. He thought that the team should be comfortable, while Beer trembled with impatience, and Suu announced the command, rebuild. At that very moment, the shadows of several goblins appeared in front of him, which had the first level and ordinary rank. Suho was surprised to observe what was happening, because this was his first successful extraction of the shadow. Usually, new shadow soldiers are weaker than they were in life. Besides, they become even less. The description also said that they would disappear in a day because he does not have the skill of storage of shadows. Beer frowned, realized that the level and points of intelligence greatly affect power over the shadows. Later he will become a good skill, but now the ant was very upset due to the lack of this skill. Suddenly the stomach sucked loudly, and the guy remembered that he hadn't been at normal for 2 days. They explained to him that he could get out of here at any moment using the key of the shadow dungeon. When he returned to the hospital, he immediately began to eat dinner, realizing how delicious the hospital food was. While the guy ate, Beer decided to explain to the Lord what he should do now, because he has only 3 missions. The first is to protect the earth from the external gods, which means that he needs to go to the dungeon and hunt monsters. So he will increase his level, the stronger he will become, the safer he will be on earth. His father did so. The second mission is to find Madame House, and if he hunts monsters, he will be able to find a hint about her stay. And the third, the most important mission, to restore the power of BR, which he lost on the way to the ground. After all, he still cannot believe that he is just an ordinary, and he wants to appear in all its glory in front of the Lord. He can receive parts of magic and knowledge of the goal, absorbed it. He used this ineffective method even before the formation of a shadow soldier. But since he cannot get magic from the Lord of another choice, and somehow he needs to eat something magical. So you need to get a hunter's license to enter the dungeon, so they needed to go to the association. The guy thought because he is awakened are able to increase his level, which pushes questions. First of all, he was wondering what rank would be given to him, first deciding that it would be a S rank. The same evening, after the check, he was informed that his level of magic was 46, and he was awakened by E rank. Bear explained that his rank is very low, and he needs to focus on increasing characteristics. An irritated, disappointing result, the guy asked not to calm him down, because it only gets worse from this. The shadow power is at a low level, and now the rank, because of which he began to wonder if he is able to protect the earth. The raid groups rarely take the Urgovi. In this case, even getting into the dungeon will be a problem. Suddenly he realized that there was one way. He was indirect, but it was better than nothing. In raids, there is a clear distribution of responsibilities where the shock detachment protects the dungeon. Meanwhile, the collection group follows and collects parts of the monsters from which armor and weapons are made for hunters. There is also the weakest, or making detachment that mines resources while in the rear. Unlike the shock detachment, even E-wrapping hunters are accepted into the collection group and the ore detachment. Sometime later, the land thanked Lim, who was his only acquaintance that helped to get here. This guy was an assistant to the teacher of the University of Konkuk, as well as the awakened E rank. He was glad that there are elders nearby because thanks to him, he can work in a dungeon, gaining new experience. Suddenly, Lim called him out and bowed sharply. I apologize for what happened at the university, thereby surprising the land. The eldest was the only one, but scared and fled alone, leaving the rest in mortal danger. He asked for forgiveness for not being able to do anything, while the land asked him to raise his head. The Association of Hunters recommends running from all legs as soon as a magic creature appears, and it simply followed according to the instructions. Lim was surprised when he found out that Suho was also E-Rang, and his level of mana is even less than himself. The elder first thought that this was impossible, because he thought he saw this guy fighting the monsters on the roof. It is possible that he just fiddled with fear, because it is difficult to believe that he could withstand them. If E-Rank fought with the monster and survived, it was impressive, and BR told him that the young lord is incredible. Turning his head with surprise, Lim bounced out of fear, saying loudly that there was a monster here. The ant explained that Suu is now weak, like a larva of an ant, so calm only when he is next to him. Lim was dumbfounded that the guy was awakened by the calling men because many E-Raps have no skills at all, but he was lucky. The eldest decided to boast that he had a run skill, and now it was clear why he did it so well. Lim did not appreciate this joke, remembering the recent incident, because of which he immediately became ashamed of his escape. Beer was pleased that he mentally destroyed him, but the guy turned around, ignoring his words. He came to the realization that, with the exception of the shadow dungeon, he had not yet been to others. Now the shock detachment is hunting for monsters there, but in order to security, the Rudo, moving detachment is forbidden to go there. At this time, the hunters displeasedly concluded that there was empty and around only magic wolves. Wolf skins are cheap, but sometimes in the pipes you can find stones of the soul, so they only need to work hard. They called on each other not to be upset because you never know that they could wait for them in the dungeon. Suddenly, one told the commander that there was something here, pointing to a huge crevice in a rock, the size of a person. When they went inside, they found strange ruins, and at first they wanted to request reinforcements from the association. However, the detection skills did not spot a single monster here, which is why the question arose of why this place is. One of them suggested that instead of a boss, a treasure was hidden here, pointing to a sword sticking out of stone. They were surprised, but at the same time tense, because they managed to find a rather strong artifact. To make sure, you need to evaluate it, but you need to be careful, because usually such treasures are surrounded by traps. At that very moment, the captain asked everyone to move away, wanting to personally pull him out, after which he held out his hand to the handle. They began to warn him that this could be a trap, but the C-rank tank was sure that he would cope with this. As soon as he touched the sword, he immediately felt something sinister, as if someone was devouring his consciousness. When the man pulled out the weapon, his comrades sighed in relief, noting that no traps worked. One of the hunters asked him to be more careful next time, but at the same second, the tank was cut off his head with a sword. The rest of the comrades watched this picture in shock, noting that their captain's eyes became different. At that very moment, the man did not in his voice ask who dared to get into the blade of the monarch Klikov. And then he instructed himself to kill the fangs invading the possession of the lord, starting to attack the hunters. Meanwhile, two minds who had just approached stared at an unusual picture. Several goblins were actively waved with pickles, and the workers were surprised that there were such call spells. Many people knew that calls to manage one or two creatures at a time, and there are 3 as many as the SU, not counting the ghost. However, it was inconvenient to call only 3. The guy needs more corpses to use the extraction of the shadow. However, their bodies can be removed from the shadow dungeon because they do all the draft work without any questions. Bears asked not to praise him after they gave the goblin such a slight task of ore mining. Now he cannot go into the dungeon alone, but he thinks to undergo a check again as soon as his mana rises. The guy recalled that they came here at hand, which concerned the return of past forces Bera. After all, he needs to absorb objects, saturated mana, including these magic stones that are scattered everywhere. Since he is useless in their prey, he can go and eat a couple from the ground to make up for the lost mana. As soon as the ant did this, he immediately shuddered, announcing the lord that the monarch was feeling. However, this was not his father, because even then his forces would instantly recover, which means that someone else wears this title. Beer felt unpleasant animal smell, while someone's evil roar rang out of the bowels of the dungeon. The worried minds began to ask each other what kind of sound it was, because it was there that a shock detachment should be. At that very moment, several pairs of red eyes appeared from the darkness. These were wolves that were heading in their direction. The men did not understand why the animals were here, but they decided to leave this place as quickly as possible. One of them began to wave a murmur in fright, trying to drive away the animal that ignored his threats. Suddenly, Suho came to his aid, with one wave of Kirky, the skull of the animal, thereby saving the guy. He decided to win time, demanding that the others leave while he deal with the beasts. Hearing the word of gratitude, the guy stood in front of a few wolves, is completely ready for battle. Their names were Orange, which means their level is the same as that of the generation of D-rank flame at the university. But if only he was alone, he could have extracted a shadow from a dead wolf, but Lim stood behind him. He asked him to leave, but the elder was not going to run away anymore, not allowing the guy to help everyone alone. Suho ordered the goblins to guard the elder, simultaneously asking him to cover him in case. Opening the inventory, the guy took the weapons of the goblins, which he picked up in the shadow dungeon, because it was better than Kirky. Meanwhile, Lim was dumbfounded that he could even call for a weapon, not understanding what his abilities he had. Do not waste time. The guy first rushed into the attack. I wish to destroy as many animals as possible in a short time. He began to cut animals one by one. While the elder was dumbfounded by this, the goblins encouraged him. Contrary to doubts, Suho began to extract a shadow of dead wolves to help you in battle. And now the battle went on equal terms, and the called wolves began to attack their comrades. Beer was pleased that the young lord so quickly used to fight side by side with shadows. Now the absorption and appeal is not at all spending Manu, so in the future he can acquire his own army. The next second, he pierced the mouth of the next wolf, adding another soldier to his ranks. The surprised goblin watched how the owner began to call for wolves, who were much stronger than him. Su completely forgot that they were watching him, and therefore calmly used the extraction of the shadow on all the dead wolves. He flinched when he heard that his physical abilities were far from E rank and also possessed such an appeal. The guy realized that he was too carried away, and now he tried to understand how to explain all this to the eldest. Meanwhile, Lim was worried that he could be from those false ones who hide their real rank. Suddenly, Su-ho received a new quest. He needed to defeat one enemy who was striving to kill the player. One enemy surprised the guy because he had already defeated all the wolves, after which he rushed his eyes deep into the dungeons. At that very moment, a man came out of the darkness to them, but his gait was rather strange, and the sinister aura. The eldest immediately realized that he was from the shock detachment, but the land was only tensed stronger, not hearing from that answer. Leaving ahead, Lim began to tell that magic animals suddenly attacked them, asking what happened to them. Su decided to warn him. It was too late because the hunter had already swung his sword at him. The guy in the last seconds managed to pull the elder back to save him from imminent death. To win a little time, he put the wolves into the attack, which were supposed to distract the hunter for a while. However, at the moment it was bothered by the fact that his name was red, which spoke of his excessive power. The redder the name, the more dangerous the enemy. He already had to feel the power of red at the university. His power is great, but he is far from the title of the Lord. But this does not mean that he can resist him in his current state. Opening the inventory, Su decided that this was enough, while Beret was worried about the Overlord. The system helps him to ensure stable growth, and since he received a quest, he has a chance to win. To see his parents, he should become as strong as possible, and as quickly as possible. That is why he will overcome red and will become stronger now, because it was a direct path to his parents. BR noticed that he again and again encounters tests that he cannot cope with but never runs away. The image of the Lord, who was able to achieve everything, giving everything to his work, is applied to this still weak image. However, the body of this creature is a sword. If you cut off your hand and separate it from the carrier, then it will not be able to move anymore. At that very moment, the wolves attacked the hunter from all sides in order to immobilize, so that it was easier to divide him with a sword. One of the wolves quickly recovered when the guy gave him a little mana because the shadow soldiers are immortal while the owner has mana. However, this did not particularly stop the man who again and again destroyed the wolves, not letting them to himself. It was a little upset by the Sioux, but Bear explained that it was only because he was still weak, like his soldiers. Suddenly, the hunter directed his sword at him, asking how such an insignificance dares to use the power of the Monarch of Shadows. Beer was unhappy that he dared to call a young master from the family of Lords of Shadows with the insignificance. The man repeated the last words, not expecting them to meet with the enemy of the Lord of the Fangs under such circumstances. Su decided to take advantage of the moment and throw a dagger into it, but he managed to react, reflecting him. Getting an axe from the inventory, the guy decided to start with intelligence in a battle in order to fluently assess the strength of the opponent. When the battle began, as expected from the red name, he easily fought off from every attack. Then the guy decided to take the quantity, after which he used the power of the ruler, throwing the weapons of goblins into the enemy. He used this ability since childhood, and then he felt it very well and could control several objects at once. That's just the weapons of the goblins at a time, and there was a feeling that it was impossible to fight off from him. One of his blow, and he is the end, but if the land is heshed, any chances of victory will disappear altogether. The Lord Klikov did not like that the guy always ran away from him, continuing to hide behind the monarch and shadow soldiers. Speak to the parents in this tone. This is already too much. But it was these words that gave rise to a feeling of anger. Despite his provocations, he lacks confidence to come closer, but he needs to become stronger. He remembered how Bura asked why, after taking the seal, his strength, which allowed him to climb the tower, did not return. As it turned out, his strength was sealed, even when he was small, because of which he again found the talent of those days. That power would be enough to resist Itaremes, but he was a test for whether he could curb his talent. It was assumed that power would disappear regardless of the outcome of the test, but the experience of staying in the tower is not meaningless. Now he needed to recall the fighting spirit and feelings from that time. Then in the tower he fought in hand-to-hand style. The soldiers of the shadow, in fact, is immortal, and while he has mana, and he can restore them as much as he likes. BR is also capable of changing his shape, which prompted the guy to a curious thought. Suo again called the wolves who were ready to fulfill any will of the Lord. The Lord Klikov decided that the guy steps on the same rake, so he simply decided to cut it into pieces. When the sword sank to Suho, the man was surprised to find that he had gloves created from raken. Thus, he increased the level of extraction of the shadow, and this was enough to get closer. BR was surprised to observe how the owner was able to turn the battle in his direction, starting to fight directly with the hunter. Suho has just aroused his strength, but he has already discovered a new level of shadow power that no one told him about. The feeling of the battle that he still demonstrated is the power of the Lord, which was now in his hands. Even his way of using the strength of shadows says that he is already capable of defeating his opponent. At this time, Suho continued to strike the opponent, and in the end, he was able to drop him with one strong blow. When the veil of dust was dispelled, the Lord of Klikov growled loudly, being a dissatisfied outline of the battle. Using the rule of the ruler, the guy again rushed into the attack, directing the weapons of the goblins to his opponent. Looking at this battle from the side, Bear is ready to say with confidence that now this guy looks like a real child prodigy. When the Lord Klikov was defeated, Su stopped worried about his red name because the victory was behind him. Also in this battle, he learned something new, which was a very worthy acquisition, and now he has something to fight. When the notification arose, the guy first decided to check the award he received for the fulfillment of the quest. He received a rune stone, a stormy section, and now he could attack many opponents at the same time. Singh instantly understood how to use it, and decided that now was the time to test it. Meanwhile, the sword, who kept the essence of the king, could not believe that he had lost the heir to the Shadow Monarch. However, this was not the end, because human greed is endless, and if the guy now touches him, he will lose. As soon as he understands this sword, how his consciousness will be immediately absorbed, and he will take the place of the heir. However, something happened, and the sword began to change. While the system announced the receipt of Rakan's Fang, the Lord Klikov did not expect that there was a person whom even he could not capture, although he received the power of the monarch. Due to the blessing of the Candia caster, all negative effects are automatically removed with the SU, which is why it cannot be subordinated. Without wasting time, the guy waved his sword using a storm cut, destroying the wall in front of him. It was problematic that the skill sucks the whole mana for one use, but its power is very high. Suddenly, the guy found that Lim began to recover and immediately hid a new weapon behind his back. Su decided to tell along the way about everything that happened, while the elder was scared, noticing a nearby hunter. When they went outside, the guy decided to return and check whether the survivors were still in the dungeon. Looking after him, Lim thought that he was awakened E-rank, who owed the skill of an unusual call. This is a small detail, but the land is very strong, although now this is not important because many survived thanks to him. Returning to the dungeon, the guy was able to find the remaining Rakens, whom he began to destroy with shadow gloves. Wolves did not stop less, but he receives experience from each, so it is better not to miss a single one. It became interesting why the power of the sword attack fell sharply, to which the weapon answered, which was not going to cooperate with the successor of the Shadow Monarch. Beer was indignant, noticing a special skill for the fight with the weak, but the sword ignored his observation. It was amazing to first meet a speaking insect, now also a sword, because of which it becomes more difficult to understand anything. Having passed a little further, they found the same passage in which there were dead hunters, killed by the Lord of the Fangs. The sword replied that he simply killed everyone who would step here, because his duty was to defend this shrine of the monarch Klikov. Suddenly, the guy grabbed him and stuck it into a stone slab, where he was originally, and asked him to be silent a little. Suddenly he found that he could use the extraction of shadow in public, and thus can turn anyone into his soldier. Suho lowered his outstretched hand, after which he raised his bodies, heading to the exit, which greatly surprised Bura. He thought that if they have to fight after death, it would be like a punishment. At that very moment, the guy began to ask questions whether his father killed this monarch, and whether he was also Itarim. Itarims are their current enemy, and the monarchs can be called the enemies of the past. There were 9 monarchs, including the Lord. The great dream of Jin Wu, known as the Shadow Monarch, the King of the Dead, which he commanded the whole afterlife. In addition to him, there were also the King of Animals, the Monarch of Animal Fangs, the Queen of Insects, the Monarch of the Plague, the King of Humanoids, the Monarch of the Iron Body, the King of Demons, the Monarch of the White Flame, the King of Giants, the Monarch of the Beginning, the King of the Snow People, the Monarch of the Cold. There was also the King of Demonic Ghosts, the Monarch Transfiguration, and the strongest of them, the King of Dragons, the Monarch of Destruction. And when 8 monarchs invaded the ground, then everyone died at the hands of his overlord, which greatly surprised the land. Suddenly the sword confirmed that the Shadow Monarch was an eternal enemy who killed his master, Monarch Klikov. If all his power was under him, he would have tore him, let the successor of the Shadow Monarch on minced meat, and then fed the wolves. Suho perfectly understood his feelings, because his father struck other monarchs to protect the land, while the sword protected this place from the invasion, and they both simply defended what was expensive for them. However, there is a difference. And now he wants to fight with him, because the Su is his successor, and no more. But if his duty is to protect this place, it is not stupid to be at enmity with his father, since the monarch Klikov could not defeat him. The guy wants to meet with his parents but cannot because of the external gods from the space, so he will borrow power with anyone. If the Itarims come, they will not spare anyone, so he is forced to ask for help from the sword, and he will help him protect this place. These words made the weapon think about uniting with the successor of a Shadow Monarch, a Shadow and a Fang shoulder to shoulder. The next day, the correspondent asked Lima to tell more about what happened and where exactly the attacking detachment was struck. This guy was one of the few who survived the incident yesterday, and now he was ready to tell them everything. However, if people learn about the successes of Su, they will be better to treat him despite the rank, and this is a great way to return the debt. That evening, the article was published on the internet. It touched the hunter E rank, who alone saved the hunters inside. The article was attended by eyewitnesses who personally saw everything. Also in it were the stories of other people whom the hunter saved. In the Black Turtle Guild, a controversial question arose of increasing labor for the collection group. Li Yonggo from the second department of the office decided to send them the candidate's profile so that the rest would consider him. It was a hunter of E rank who wanted in the D Raga dungeon, evacuated the collection group, and pulled out the attacking detachment. They could not believe that E rank did it, but if they recruit him, they could arrange a great excitement. Because of this, a hero may appear among E-Oranges, and right now they decided to try to contact him. After a while, it was interesting whether Singo answered, because E rank, who received an invitation from the guild, should rejoice. However, on the faces of the elders, a shock was written when they learned that he rejected the proposal, deciding not to enter the Black Turtle. They did not understand why a low rank refused the proposal of a large guild, and with what it was connected. The workers were indignant, considering that the guy imagined himself with a S rank, but they were sure that he would soon contact them again. Meanwhile, he finished the next telephone conversation, breathing heavily from the pressure of different guilds. Since he visited the dungeon, the invitation to various guilds does not stop. All of them want to hire him as a collector or producer, but there were too many people. Entry into the guild will become an obstacle to raising a level using a system, so it makes no sense. Then the guy looked at the Rakan's click sword, offering him to continue the conversation from that, but they didn't finish anything. During the last conversation, he did not understand how the guy could say something so meaningless so calmly. However, the shadow can be an ally, not an enemy, so he asked him to bring him to another sanctuary of the Monarch Klikov. And he knew the location of the sanctuaries of the Monarch Klikov, regardless of their remoteness. He also felt that the gates leading there had already disappeared, and people call it a breakthrough of the dungeon. It turns out that the sanctuary has turned into a field-type dungeon, which a little complicates the task for them. These were the lands empty due to the breakthrough of the dungeon, which occurs in abandoned gates where monsters lived. Su wrote an uncle that he would leave for a while, and asked not to worry if he stopped in touch. After that, he collected things, not forgetting to grab the sword, deciding to go to the sanctuary right now. After a couple of hours, when they got to the appointed place, the guy was slightly surprised, standing in front of a closed territory. It was not a very good sign, because this place belongs to the Hunters Guild. For the rest, the entrance was prohibited. To penetrate into someone else's territory is illegal, and the Hyena Guild was created for criminals, where there are a lot of thugs. Beer wanted to offer not to listen to this creation of the creation, and to raise the level, but suddenly hesitated, looking at the owner. Suo was firmly intended to enter, and even if the guild was against it, and he has his own ways to get around them. Using the power of the ruler, he broke the surveillance chambers, and thus there will be no evidence. When they penetrated the territory, the guy had a question whether it was always so vague in the dungeons of a field type. Fog is cosmic magic. It destroys spatial barriers, creates cracks in the world. Cosmic deities are trying to create a huge hole in the dimension and send troops here, but this requires huge costs of mana. It turns out that the most powerful enemies will not arrive soon, which means that they have enough time to become stronger. At the same moment, monsters began to appear in front of them, which looked like wild monkeys and cats. The sword immediately began to shine with energy, wanting to demonstrate his strength, to which Su reacted with a smile. However, the guy decided that he would not use it as a weapon, which was a little surprised by the sword. He had already thought about how he would fight, after which he rushed on monsters with bare hands, wanting to attack. As a base, he used hand-to-hand combat, which was closer to him than waving a sword. At medium and long distances, he will help himself the rule of the ruler, deciding to be unpredictable. Due to its pressure and speed, the animals did not keep up with him, because of which they were destroyed one after another. Singh also decided to get more equipment by extracting the shadow, such as his new style of battle. Beer was beside himself with happiness, while the sword thought with admiration about the strength of the family of the Shadow Monarch. The more enemies, the longer the battle lasts, and the stronger the guy becomes using the dead. The level of intelligence has grown a little, and you may be lazy to be called 5 shadow soldiers whom he made from animals. I take it that it was nothing compared to the thousands of the Lord. The guy asked him to shut up. Having passed a little further, they noticed the area where the gates were located, leading to the sanctuary. The guy did not play in the hands that there were still people here, although it was already too late in time, which was strange. It was not clear why they were here at such an hour, because it was better to hunt monsters on the day. Suddenly, a car came to them, with which tied guys and girls began to come out, under the vigilant glances of the guild. Suo immediately realized that they became witnesses of abduction, and now they could not just take and retreat. Beer decided that it was better not to intervene, because they invaded foreign territory, because they can be caught. But when he looked towards the Lord, he noticed that he had already gone, heading down, closer to the enemy. His father, a detective in violent crimes, and his grandfather, the legendary fireman, and it is clear who he went to. Meanwhile, a man who touched the cheek of a bound woman felt that someone was approaching him. It was Suho, who was already in the air, directing his leg towards the villain's face, wanting to attack. The guy who watched his relatives for 21 years is used to acting as soon as he sees injustice. This blow was enough to trample the man into the ground, thereby temporarily leaving him from consciousness. The rest immediately grabbed the weapon, while the guy reproached himself that the body was moving on its own. It is forbidden to invade the territory of other people's guilds, so it was urgent to figure out how to get out of this situation. Suddenly, it occurred to him to create a mask from the shadows, in a heroic voice speaking of abductions and danger to people. In ignoring his statement, Su again began to ask who he was, once made his way to their territory and climbed into a fight. Without waiting for an answer, embittered hunters immediately rushed into battle, wanting to punish an illegal invader. The average rank of members of the Guyana Guild, D, so the guy has so far decided not to use all his strength. However, even this was enough to greatly surprise the opponents, who began to easily pour from his blows. Suho was concentrated and beat off from all sides, not letting the enemy weapons. Now he has grown up to the step that people who are assigned to the D rank cannot oppose him. The guy also was surprised to think that it was too simple, although his characteristics were far from the ideal. A few minutes later, all members of the guild that were here were tightly connected and were unconscious. Having shaking off the dust, the guy listened to the praise of Bera, after which he decided to untie those who had just been brought here. They thanked him for his help and decided that he was a hunter from the association. The guy immediately agreed with this. Suo added that to take care of the rest, asking them to go to a safe place, and as soon as possible. As soon as they disappeared, the question arose: why the guilds were generally abducted by people, because there was no sense in this. However, Rakana's sword suddenly felt something unusual, thereby deciding to attract the attention of the guy. Pointing to the warehouse, the weapon stated that the true reason they came here is there. Entering inside, Suho with a dumbfounded look noticed huge cells, bowls and chains, as if animals were holding here. However, it was obvious that the abducted people were kept here, but some strange energy was also in the air. Looking into one of the cells, they found a peacefully sleeping puppy, which was wounded and was on a leash. But the sword was sure that this was not a puppy, but a sharpened young wolf cub, whose energy was simply crushed. In fact, this puppy is the heir to the king of animals, the monarch Klikov, which dumbfounded the land. Immediately after the defeat in the war against the Lord of the Shadows, Monarch Klikov defended his heir and sent to a safe place. He believed that if his heirs survived, then one day another monarch could be born, but did not hope for the birth of another monarch. His true goal was to simply protect his heritage, because he did not have 100% confidence in his own victory. The energy belonging to the monarch came from the puppy, but he was extremely weak. If he was left, he would definitely die. Suo already wanted to make a decision as his friend widened when the gate suddenly opened. The guys outside lay unconscious, and the guest hoped that there would be at least a couple of a person, but he sees only one. The guy in shock noticed a monster who said that this guild is useless and people cannot be trusted. At that very moment, the sword was surprised that Brookie was alive, and Sue did not imagine that they could be familiar. As it turned out, this monster is the guard of the heir, who was also glad to see the sword that he was still alive. Suddenly, Rakan flared up. I asked, did he really forget that he had to defend the heir? Looking at the puppy in the hands of the guy, the question arose of how he could allow the heir to be on the verge of death. Suddenly, Brookie approached the Sioux, feeling the smell of a man who dared to touch the puppy. The guy immediately realized that this monster is fast, and he, in turn, quickly took the heir to himself, attacking the land. The worried BR watched from the side of the young lord, who took the whole blow of the monster. Having destroyed the wall and container, the guy realized that of all the blows, this one was the most painful. Blood came from his head, and it rang in his ears, but at the same moment the skill of stability worked, increasing physical protection. When they only arrived, Burrs felt dense energy, and only now he realized that it was actually. When he explained that the energy of Itaramov comes from this monster, a shock appeared on the guy's face, because he did not expect this. Meanwhile, Rakan did not understand why Brookie behaved so casually and brazenly with the heir to the master. He explained that he was able to control such power when he left the shelter, and some helped him a lot with this. Such is the law of nature. The strongest survive, and the weak is subordinate to them in everything. The strong should absorb the weak. This little one is insignificant weak, albeit originally from the family of Monarch Klikov, and is great for the role of snacks. Periodically, he sucked his blood containing particles of the power of the Monarch of the Fangs to increase his. Then he decided to kill them, because he will not be able to make any half-breeds that cannot be compared to his power. Rakan died because he was weak, and he survived, which means that he can be calmly called strong. Brookie decided that he was most suitable for the role of the new monarch of Klikov, but at that very moment, he was suddenly attacked. BR managed to catch the puppy, whom the monster threw into the air due to pain, preventing him from receiving even more wounds. Su wanted to notice that the Fang is very angry at him, which means that right now they share their feelings. Now they have created the first alliance of shadows and fangs because they have a common and quite strong enemy. In addition, the guy finally found a thread leading to his father, which means that he needs to knock out the information in order. At the same moment, a notification of the new quest surfaced, where the Su-Ho needed to defeat Brookie and ensure its security. Holding back tears, there is nothing left to do anything but not to look and not interfere while the Lord fights. Looking in the name of the monster, Su-Ho with a grin realized why their guild was of such a strange name. But it was not clear how the monster could establish a guild, at the same time, kidnapping people, and whether it was connected with Itaremes. Suddenly, the bound members of the guild came to consciousness, who turned to Mr. Brookie, attracting his attention. They asked to free them because this guy is not so simple, and they agree to help him defeat him. Having waved his sword, Su decided not to let him do it, but he froze, stunnedly glancing at the monster. Widely opening the mouth, Brookie was enough to close the jaw once in order to cut off their heads at once to all the beguilders. Brookie, I need help against someone like that from those who deserve to be only his prey. Without wasting time, the guy soared the air, directing the sword to his enemy, who entered so terribly with his comrades. Having blocked the sword with a bare hand, the monster heard the question of how he dares to kill people for such an insignificant reason. Brookie with a crazy smile replied that in the life of the weak belongs to strong, because this is the law of nature. And strong does not need a reason to do what they please, because no one can interfere with them. At that very moment, the guy began to dodge incredibly strong blows that could cause huge damage. Suo was already able to withstand one of his blows, but if this continues, his defense may not withstand. The guy soared into the air, wanting to increase the distance for a short time in order to take a short time from the enemy's field of view. After that, he began to sharply go down, using a storm cut, trying to inflict serious damage. However, small scratches caused only laughter in Brookie, because this is all that the relic of the Monarch of Klikov could do him. But suddenly he felt a sharp pain when the blade pierced deep into his back. Suo has not yet finished with his attack, after which he used the power of the ruler, starting to rotate the sword inside the monster. Meanwhile, Click asked why Brookie became so, because he praised the master and swore to him allegiance. Brookie remembered how Rakana praised him, but at the same moment his mind was clouding, and he began to pull out his sword. He screamed loudly. He threw the weapon to the side, breaking it into small fragments, not wanting to agree with the Fang. Now he had no respect for him. All this time he only leaned before his strength. He will not continue to power such a miserable existence when Rakana has long been not alive. When Su-Ho looked at the sword with horror, he was distracted for a second, because of which he received a painful blow to the stomach. The guy's eyes climbed out when he felt the bones of the internal break, and the pain burned the body. But when he thinks about his father, who fights somewhere there, it opens the second wind in him. Having overpowered the pain, Suo began to create shadow gloves to repulse his offender. Now he could not afford to give up, because he needs to do a lot more to meet his parents. Meanwhile, the power of the Fang continued to flow out of the cracks of the sword. Perhaps this is its inglorious end. The life of the heir, and even the future of Fangs now falls on the shoulders of Slee Suk, but he would like to fight further. Suddenly, Click drew attention to the heir to the master, who began to awaken from sleep, scaling his teeth. At the same time, Su-Ho continued to fight Brookie, turning from his blows and trying to apply his own. Click realized that the heir was inspired by how this man was fighting, and his eyes lit up with fire. The last thing he remains was to share the remaining force with the descendant so that he helps the guy win. However, the time was getting less and less because Brookie managed to attack a guy who was already at the limit. His health was almost at zero, and he thought that he could surpass himself, but overestimated his possibilities. Brookie also noticed that he lasted quite a long time for an insignificant worm, but was it possible to overcome him? Reining forward, the monster opened his mouth, wanting to strike the last blow to the defenseless goal. When his hand was a few centimeters on behalf of Su-Ho, a huge wolf came to the aid of the guy, which bit Brookie. Between the guy and the monster stood the heir to Rakan, who returned the former great appearance of the wolf. Suddenly, the notification announced that the heir Klikov would give tribute to the player's military spirit. The system also suggested recruiting the heir to the Fangs as his ally, which was dumbfounded by the land. He could not believe that the heir to Klikov, that wolf cub, and he could recruit him by making his ally. Brookie did not expect that the heir to Rakan would decide to absorb Manu Click, who would return his previous forces. Su-Ho was surprised to guess that Click sacrificed himself to save the heir, thereby proving his faith. And since from the very beginning he was going to unite with a Fang, then nothing would prevent him from uniting with the heir. He had no reason to refuse, so he gave his answer to the system, which immediately responded to this. Suddenly, the guy felt the connection between himself and the wolf, which meant that the system united them into one team. Then Su saw the memories of the wolf cub at a time when they lost in the war with the Shadow Monarch. Brookie told him that the strongest survive in this world, and they, losers, will lose a lot. For the sake of the prosperity of the fangs, the heir should become stronger, and therefore he is obliged to protect him at the cost of his life. But the next second, the memories changed. The wolf cub was trembling, looking at how strange people surrounded Brookie. The monster did not understand why they did not kill him, because now he was on the verge of death, very weak and covered with wounds. The woman who was holding the child in her arms noticed that this monster seems to be satisfied, and therefore perfectly suits them. When she chose it, a golden stone was inserted into the monster's eye, and the wolf cub was trembling with fear, looking at this picture. From that moment on, Brookie's goal was to catch people and bring them to them, like a sacrifice. What she put into him should have helped him become stronger, and therefore he should not abandon this power. Of course, it all depends on the user, but any desire can be distorted, which directly affects the Brooks. When the land returned to reality, he realized with horror that he saw all the memories of the heir to the fangs. Creatures who place something in the eye of Brookie are clearly somehow connected with Idarims, and this is a clue for him. And at the same moment, it became clear that the heir to Klikov wants to take revenge on Brookie, but to stop his riot. Since the matter is related to the plans of these creatures, he must defeat Brookie in order to find out all the necessary information. But looking at his opponent, it becomes clear that he does not have enough strength to defeat such a monster. But suddenly the system said that, having recruited an ally, he received a quest in which it was necessary to recruit 8 heirs of the monarch. He also studied the new skill of the union, forming a connection with the heir to the fangs that the guy immediately felt. Noticing the bright light, Beer thought that the experience of the young lord is strikingly different from what the king experienced. Brookie did not understand what was happening, but he was not going to just wait, and sharply rushed into the attack. But to his surprise, the attack did not pass successfully, forcing him to retreat, demolishing various obstacles with his back. When the skill of the union was successfully created, Brookie was surprised to notice the changes in the appearance of the guy standing in front of him. Suo changed beyond recognition. A cross appeared on his forehead, and his hair became longer, completely whitewashing. This skill allowed the air to move into his body, improving the physical condition, and feelings become acute, like a beast. While the guy was trying to understand how he was able to absorb the air, Brookie again swung his hand, wanting to attack. Suho, with extraordinary ease, began to dodge every blow. His body became light, and all his feelings worsened. Now the slightest movement is enough to avoid danger, and now he was not afraid of the attack of the monster. Having finished dodging, the guy inflicted a counterattack, hitting Brookie's chin with his foot right, forcing him to spit blood. The monster was discouraged, and did not understand what was happening, because this kid did not look like the one that was a couple of minutes ago. However, now he cannot lose, because then to lose everything that the saviors gave him, giving strength. Brookie did not know what the guy did, but was sure that he would never lose to some kind of person. The difference in strength proceeds from the inequality of species, and the human appearance is the weakest in the universe. Before their fists met, the monster asked the guy to blame himself, that he was born a miserable person. At the same moment, the SUI studied the skill of hand-to-hand combat allows the enemies to apply additional 33% of damage without weapons. Meanwhile, Beer was outraged that the monster dared to talk about the difference in species in the presence of a young master. When the ant said that there was no one above the Shadow Monarch, the awareness came to Brookie, who was facing him. Looking at the guy attacking him, he realized that these are the boys of the Shadow Monarch are much more connected than he thought. One incredibly strong blow to the land managed to trample the monsters of the earth, creating a huge devastation and a shockwave. When the opponent was defeated, Rakan's air disconnected from the guy's body, returning his former appearance. Being in a semi-conscious state, Brookie, as if in delirium, said that he should become stronger. Suddenly, the air to Click went to his comrade, starting to lick a place above the eye, destroying the curse. When the veil was dispelled in his eyes, the monster with despair in his voice remembered why it should become stronger. He remembered his master, mentally apologized to him, because then he was furious from defeat. When the system announced that Suho defeated Guinu Brookie, the air howled loudly, and the guy's level increased. Beer wanted to praise the young master, but he stopped him, because now it was more important than praise. The ant felt the energy of Itarimov from Brookie, and he managed to catch a glimpse of the memories of the heir to the fangs. The hunters who entered the dungeon to Brookie placed something in his eyes, and they can be the messengers of Idarims. Perhaps these were the apostles for communication with reality, and their act should be connected with the invasion of this world. The apostles of Idarims are now on Earth, but it would be nice to get more information, trying not to lose a trace. Bera had a way to find out something. He could absorb Brockie's corpse to see the memories of Itarimov. And besides this, he will be able to restore his mana, so he will kill 2 birds with 1 shot. Suo was surprised that he had such an ability, but did not know whether it was worth doing this with the defender of the air. Looking at the wolf that did not look away from the monster, the guy invited him to go with him to show one place. At first, the air looked at him displeasedly, after which he approached and began to lick like a loving dog. Having decided to take the wolf away, Singo opened the portal in the shadow dimension, simultaneously wishing to take good luck. The ant was a little embarrassed, thought that the gentleman was too kind to him, but the matter did not require delay. A little later, I took it interesting why the Lord decided to go to the dungeon instead of returning home. Su decided the first thing to find a house for the heir to the fangs, but the ant considered it strange to do it in a shadow dungeon. Now they are allies with him. He does not have a defender, and his sanctuary also disappeared, and now the guy was sorry for him. Suddenly the wolf turned around, and the system announced that the heir Klikov wants the player to give him a name. At first, Su wanted to call him Rocky, and BR thought with trembling that his ability to give names just like that of the Lord. A smile appeared on the face of the wolf when he received a new name, and the level of trust increased to respect. At that very moment, the guy announced this forest of Click, asking to use it with benefit. The system accepted this order. It will not have to worry about food, because the heir to Rakan can eat living creatures or monsters. There are still monsters, from which he did not get rid of, and a good idea to ask Rocky to arrange cleaning. As if feeling the owner's desire, the wolf rushed to the attack on the goblins, which hid between the trees. Sitting on a tree, the guy thought that Rocky was moving well, but we had to deal with the things received. At that very moment, Suho received the title of Wolf Killer, and when battle with the beasts, its characteristics increased by 40%. Then the guy drew attention to the quest in which it was necessary to find the heirs of the monarchs and recruit them as allies. BR heard that the level of raising the levels created for him was revised by eliminating the unkind intentions contained in it. The plan was to forcefully make a person known as a Dream Jin Woo, and the architect used it. His father was supposed to be a vessel for the Shadow Monarch, and after reaching the goal, it was planned to destroy the soul. However, he was able to go against the goals of the system, and himself became a Shadow Monarch, contrary to the plan of the architect. However, only one Shadow Monarch can exist in the world, which is why the system was slightly revised. It adapts to the direction in which the land moves, and serves as a conductor for him, creating new functions. The guy thought about the goal of his system, after which he decided to see his characteristics, which he had not looked into. Ever since he encountered Flames of Flame, his characteristics have increased significantly. He got a lot of useful skills, but still weak. Even in the last battle, he would lose, if not for Rocky. If the quests correspond to his desires, they must be fulfilled, and after fulfillment, he will be able to meet with his parents. Having jumped off the tree, the guy also wondered if BR could find any traces of Itaremes in the memories of Brookie. The ant completely looked at them, and however, he did not find the apostles, Brookie flushing the brains, as if they were not at all. At first it seemed to him that there were no hooks, but BR managed to notice something interesting. There remained memories of a man who founded a hyena guild for Brookie and took the stolen people. Suo was dumbfounded that the monster was able to receive help from the outside, and even from a large guild. His guild was called a Gloomy Reaper, and if you delve into this guild, they will be able to find out more about Itareem. Meanwhile, the leader of the Gloomy Priest to contact Lim to the genome, which was supposed to go to Southeast Asia to help. However, now it did not matter, because the news says that it was he who stood behind the incident with the hyena. The man tried to deny everything, but he was asked not to move away from the topic because everything was already known. Lim found out that Ming Sleep fulfilled some kind of guinea assignment, and the association will soon find out about it. However, you do not need to be too self-confident because with the chairman of the association, it is not so easy to deal. He should clean him before he returned, so that some other truth does not surf. Min Dream was unhappy that this guy was just his driver, and when he became a S rank, arrogance from him rushing. Refencing emotions, the man struck the table menacingly, destroying him into small pieces, unable to cope with anger. He learned from the survivors that some young hunter in a mask defeated Brookie and destroyed the entire Geen Guild. He cannot waste time on someone about whom he has insufficient information, so he will leave it for later. After all, right now he has something more important. The man looked at the small sphere that he held between his fingers. It was stardust, a stimulator of awakening hunters. If the business goes uphill, no one can look at it from top to bottom. Burrs encouraged Rocky to try even more diligent to be able to become a useful young overlord. So I was surprised that the ant called him a different name, but was still glad that he would quickly adapt. Suddenly, the system announced that the ally received experience from hunting monsters, which was divided with a player by 50%. The guy immediately said about it, asking if such a system existed earlier, but he could not give an accurate answer. Something similar happened when the Shadow Soldiers fought and earned experience for the Shadow Monarch. It gets only half, but the automatic raising the level is quite useful, so Rocky can continue to hunt. Suddenly, a new status window appeared, which said that SUO fulfilled the conditions for obtaining a quest in a shadow dungeon. After that, the daily quest of stripping the dungeon began, where it was necessary to kill 100 goblins, 10 captains, and 1 centurion. The guy was pleasantly surprised that he could get this quest every day, for which he could receive a reward. It seems that the system wants to make this place of its territory, but he still needed to find a large number of goblins. Suddenly, The land remembered how he received a flute rog when he killed the goblins, and she could call them to him. The next second, he began to blow into the horn, creating a loud and unpleasant sound, urging the nearest goblins. I did not have to wait long because of the nearest trees, a huge flock of armed goblins was already running on them. BR was struck by the smoking of the master because this significantly facilitated the task for them, not spending time on their search. Clutching his hand into a fist, the guy rushed on them on the attack, wanting to get as much experience as possible and fulfill the quest. From his blows, the monsters scattered in all directions, while the fists were covered with blue and sticky blood. Now he was already bored of fighting goblin, but the system demanded to defeat a whole bunch of these creatures. Without thinking twice, the guy again used the flute several times to increase the number of goblins. A few moments later, a whole army stood in front of him, which was ready to destroy the alien converter. Now the number of enemies was quite suitable for him. With a wave of his hand, he forced the closest dead goblins to rebel. The guy ran forward, while Rocky did not lag behind, starting to gnaw the opponents one after another. After 3 hours of stubborn hunting, the wolf was very tired, while the quest began to suddenly be overfulfilled. The quest was completed, and the land was offered to receive a reward, but it was in no hurry to agree. Looking at the only notification, the guy was in thought as he noticed something strange. The numbers behaved strangely because the quest was completed, and they continued to grow, as if it were not the end. Suddenly Sue smiled, realizing that he would be able to get a great reward than to overflow than was given initially. Since the counter does not stand still, perhaps there is still some hidden quest, so they need to continue the hunt. After a couple of hours, Rocky was completely exhausted, and the murder meter stopped when twice as many goblins were killed. The quest ended again, and the guy was again offered to choose a reward. He was glad that nothing to hide from him. First of all, he chose the restoration of the status, which is why his health and fatigue were completely restored. With an increase in the level, it becomes more difficult to become stronger, and with this award, daily improvements in the characteristics are guaranteed. The last awards he had to choose a random damn box or random blessed box. One gives what he wants and the other what he needs, but the second case is unlikely to coincide with his desires. What he wants is too vague, and the list of things he needs cannot be fitted even on one sheet. Sue decided to choose a random damned box, after which he received gloves, a horn of a volcano, which was pleasantly surprised. These gloves had two effects. One of them increases damage, and the other, thanks to the absorption of the soul of demons, increases strength. He could not all the time turning shadow soldiers into weapons, so a separate weapon is now very helpful. Damage increased by 30%, and with the number of killed demons, the damage would also grow. But the gloves were heavy. Having invested the remaining points of characteristics by force, Singh decided to simply hunt demons and improve new weapons. Suddenly, the system indicated that Rocky changed confidence with respect for fear, and Beer explained that the wolf had no endless endurance. Then he decided to finish today, deciding to find something from the outside, after which the Gloomy Reaper thought about the guild again. Having left the Shadow Dungeon, the Land thought about where to start the investigation, when suddenly his phone rang. It was an SMS here as a teacher who asked to help him. It was written as if he was in danger. When he reached the Soul Station, the joyful limb began to wave him, thanks to the fast arrival. As it turned out, he was going to go to the dungeon, but at the very last moment the team threw him. As a result, not a single person came to work, and he had no choice but to turn to a faithful comrade. The eldest was sure that they were drinking somewhere now, but Singh asked him to calm down because he agreed to help. Lim handed him a protective costume, because the work of the collector is much more complicated than the producer, so the costume is a necessity. A team of miners dug resources after the end of the cleansing, and collectors take out objects left after the murder. The costume is needed in case of an unforeseen ambush of monsters. In addition, fangs and claws of corpses can also hurt them. Inspecting his new form, Sue did not expect the hunter so seriously related to security. At the same moment, a shock detachment approached them, which was surprised that the collectors were many times less than supposed. Lim explained the current situation, but the hunters reminded them of the contract and the money that they invested. They threatened to send an official complaint to the association, and because of such carelessness, collectors no longer see work. From the side of the shock detachment, it looked like complete irresponsibility, but Lim was not even the leader of the team of collectors. The elder hastened to assure them that they would cope, barely audible asking for a help using a call. Meanwhile, the guy carefully examined the shock detachment, trying to understand what kind of rank they were. He noticed 4 D Urgovaya magicians, 5 D Iran fighter, and 1 C-Rax healer. The one who shouted now was a healer. The damn box gave him what he needs, a weapon that absorbs demons, as well as a timely manner of limb. As well as a field-type dungeon, the owner of which is the Gloomy Reaper Guild, all this cannot be a coincidence. Meanwhile, in the depths of this building, there were 3 demons who tormented the body of a barely living person. The guy's instincts literally shouted that something terrible would soon happen, so you need to be prepared for everything. At this time, The shock detachment, which entered the dungeon, immediately took up combat positions as soon as Mantrov noticed. The leader asked the collection team not to go far and work quickly, as there were only 2 of them. Suhu was surprised to see the monsters because he was sure that there would be a demonic type of monsters. However, this was a good opportunity to look live at the battle of the hunter team. You need to study how they interact in the battle. At that very moment, the guy inserted the key to the shadow dungeon to open the portal between the measurements. Thanks to the performance of a daily quest, he has many corpses of godly captains and centurions. After an increase in intelligence, he can call 7 shadow soldiers, so he can cope with work even faster. Meanwhile, the shock detachment finished with the first horde, deciding to rest a little before going further. The team was surprised by such a quick break, but nothing could be done, because they had only 2 collectors. The leader was sure that they were delaying them, but when he looked in their direction, he noticed that the goblins had already finished. Suo, in turn, noticed that the shock detachment is much slower than he thought, because they had to move on. The man in shock began to ask about culled creatures, and Lim thought that he was trying to start a fight. But suddenly, the leader grabbed his hand, literally begging to become their special collector, but the guy was not going to work for them. The man promised that he would have the highest salary in the market, when suddenly his subordinate announced the problem. When the guy said that they stumbled upon a human corpse, the leader sucked, trying to realize what he heard. After a couple of minutes, they stood above the charred body of a man from which the blue flame still emanated. Judging by the appearance, it was a simple civilian one, but now almost nothing reminds of a person in him. No one has ever heard from the local creatures capable of controlling fire, but Lim and the Suho immediately guessed everything. It was very similar to the creation of the flame with which they first met at the university. The leader decided to ask in more detail, learning that these 2 were at the scene of the incident that day. At that very moment, a shock detachment from different ends of the corridor reported that the bodies of people were scattered everywhere. One of the teams suggested stopping the raid and report to all associations, because it is not known what is ahead. These corpses really belong to civilian without equipment, but their team consists of hunters, so there should be no problems. As a result, the leader decided to continue, which was surprised by Suho, who believed that going further in such a situation was the most stupid decision. The guy did not want to convince him, but the last word was behind the leader, so he asked the command to follow them. Limu also did not like this venture, but Su reminded him of the skill of running, which someone possesses. Having frowned, the guy in advance that if he smells fried, he should run without looking back. Entering a narrow tunnel where the rails began, Su already felt that nothing good was waiting ahead of them. Meanwhile, in the deepest part of the mine, still living people, they made a rider in pain, embraced by a blue flame. 3 demons watched their suffering, as if for them it was pleasant music. Their firing power leaves much to be desired, but it is important for them to know how the progress of providing them with a large amount of fuel is advancing. As it turned out, there were problems with resources, so it became more difficult to get fuel, and they need to create a new supplier. They need a lot and quickly, because they did not expect the hyenas responsible for the fuel to have problems. Because of this, they will produce less stardust than the rest, which will negatively affect their reputation. Suddenly, they spotted the presence from above. Feeling the hunters, they were delighted because their fuel is on the way. One of them decided to go and meet them, but at the same moment, they reminded him that he should grab them alive. At this time, the shock detachment continued to deal with lizards in which they did not see much interference. The leader decided to treat the wounds of the allies, thinking that they will earn quite a lot of money today. Suddenly, he put his hand in his pocket, deciding that today her time had come, since they have excellent collectors today. Having taken out a small sphere, the man demonstrated Stardust Ally, asking if they know about it. It was a mana amplifier, very popular among modern hunters. Moreover, it is not just to get it. The effect lasts only a week, but its strength is enough to raise the rank of a weak hunter an order of magnitude higher. If he takes advantage of her right now, he will become a S rank, which at times will facilitate the raid for the whole group. When the last words jumped out of the mouth of a man, he felt something close to him very quickly. The demon who went out to meet them waved his sword, hitting the leader in the back, reminded himself that they needed alive. Stardust crashed against the ground, while the rest of the detachment decided that they were attacked by a boss. But when the demon showed up that he had hit the dull side and did not kill, the hunters were even more frightened because the monster was a speaker. In any case, it was their enemy, so they needed to remain on the alert, but their strength was clearly not enough. At this time, the demon counted 10 hunters whom he considered strong rivals, but was not going to retreat. Having taken out Stardust from the sleeve, he considered that he did not need all 10. It would be enough to kill strong hunters. The shock detachment was dumbfounded when he noticed a cherished pill in the monster's hands, not expecting even monsters to use it. Having rushed forward, the hunters decided to kill him until he had an effect, because it was too late to run away. Without moving, the demon with one wave of the sword figured out at once with 2 guys who were the closest. The wizard, who did not have time to break the distance, immediately fell dead when the cut of the demon's sword pierced his head. Due to the death of this wizard, light disappeared in the tunnel, which is why the demon was easier to deal with uninvited guests. Meanwhile, SUU had a new quest. He had to save the 7 surviving, captured by a demon. The guy, who was quite far from the shock detachment, was surprised that the demon suddenly appeared here. The guy immediately told about everything I took, tensing from the thought that somewhere nearby are the same demons abducting people. The more a person he saves, the higher the reward, and very soon they may be in great danger if he does not make his time. Without wasting time, he told Limu that something had happened to the shock detachment, so he needs to get out of the dungeon faster. The goblins began to lead him to the exit, while the elder was unlocking, trying to fully understand the situation. But when he found out that the land would go in search of a shock detachment, he immediately calmed down, understanding his position. He knew that he would only interfere under his feet, but decided to immediately request assistance in the association as soon as he got out. The guy immediately decided to unite with Rocky, because he could not lose a second. Meanwhile, the demon dragged the bodies of hunters to the rest, and the other 2 were surprised by his speeds. Soon the gates were supposed to open, and the demons were called up, so in honor of his victory, he could toss up the thrush. They were glad that they replenished the fuel supply, because now they will be able to produce stardust without any problems. The poison that they learned to cook thanks to secret demonic techniques, and a stimulator obtained from the poison of the berserker. Berserker's poison can increase the magical forces of a person, but has a side effect. It absorbs vital energy. Side effects of flame could be softened if they are replaced by fire at the birth of a flame from the underworld. But all this happened only thanks to the apostle that such a secret manufacturing method told them. Magic creatures that decompose living creatures and turn them into crazy monsters is that the apostle brought to their world. Thanks to this, he seemed to be a chance to become stronger in them, why they were madly happy. Suddenly the demon shuddered, feeling someone's approach, not expecting the hunters still left here. Staring at the door, they realized that this was impossible, and the high probability that it was a new hunter. At that very moment, the door was knocked out of the hinges with a powerful blow of the leg, after which Suho entered inside. Carefully inspecting the room, the guy realized that he had found those who had been waiting for all this time so desperately. But suddenly he froze, noticing behind them several ranges of flame, which were tied and burned. Fortunately, people were still unharmed, but at the same moment Suho was suddenly attacked. In the last moments, he managed to dodge, not allowing the blade to somehow harm his body, which surprised the demon. The guy immediately realized whose hands the murder of hunters was, because this demon was moving at an incredible speed. However, Suho also decided to show what he was capable of, deciding to attack the demon, but he managed to put up a sword. Other demons were surprised that the guy is able to evade the attacks of the younger Stardust. They decided to take the case into their own hands, after which they took Stardust, while the land fought with the youngest. The brothers immediately asked the younger to move away to personally deal with the arrogant invasion. The guy decided to retreat, as soon as possible breaks the distance between the 2 rivals. But one of them managed to be behind the Suho, using the magic that pierced the guy with electricity. Suho managed to give a command to the shadows, after which the called creatures immediately began to find a form. The goblins immediately rushed to defend the owner, mercilessly attacking the nearest demon with his bare hands. This forced the monster who restrained the sons to freeze in a daze when he suggested who was in front of him. Using this hitch, the guy threw the demon away while he announced what he saw his brother. It looked 1-to-1, like the power of a shadow monarch that they, demons, observed on the day of their destruction. Nevertheless, he is much weaker than the true shadow monarch, so they do not cost anything to defeat him. There is no need to be afraid of him, because he is only one, and his strength is not enough to defeat them under the influence of Stardust. Suho fluently appreciated that each of them is weaker than Brookie, but it would be difficult to fight with them at the same time. He remembered that Beer had retained the corpse of Brookie. I don't understand why he leaves him if the soldiers are getting weaker. At that moment, the guy thought about something when he saw his last moments and made a decision for himself. And now he can use his strength to make it his warrior, because for a long time he was under the control of Itarimov. But in this case, he needs Rocky to give his consent, because Brookie is his defender. Looking at the wolf, he looked happy that his comrade decided to do the last good deed for the defender. Without hesitation, Singo opened the portal in the shadow dungeon, using the key donated by Bir. He turned to Brookie, giving him a chance to fight if he was still repenting of his dark acts. Hearing his call, the shadow of Hyena immediately rushed towards the owner, wanting to help him in the upcoming battle. At the same second, a warrior appeared in front of the demons, who was much stronger than goblins. Having learned Brookie in this shadow, the demons were unable to believe that this kid defeated him, after which he appropriated himself. Now there were Land, Rocky, and Brookie, their entire detachment, and Beer with tears in his eyes asked not to forget about him. At that very moment, the whole team rushed into the attack, because their forces were approximately equal, and each had their own opponent. The terrible sounds of the battle were heard, and both sides did not want to give advantages to the opponent. But suddenly, not far from them, red gates appeared, from which a girl with a weapon in her hand slowly came out. She did not understand who decided to call her, suggesting that it was a demon who hunts her. Suddenly, her eyes widened in surprise when she noticed the shadow soldiers participating in the battle. Meanwhile, Suu fought fiercely with one of the demons, not paying attention to the appearance of a stranger. He was already close to defeating the first demon, bringing up incredibly strong blows on him. Suddenly, a charge of electricity collapsed in front of him, from which he managed to bounce in time. It will not just cope with them, and if the battle is delayed, then Rocky will simply pull out the whole mana out of it. Even Brookie, put a fingerly soldier and losing part of his strength, reached the limit, fighting with only one of them. He had to somehow divide them in order to cut down one at a time, but at the same second a girl appeared in front of him. Having directed her spear at him, she frowned, deciding to find out where Mr. Dream Jin Woo, since his shadow soldiers are here. Suo did not understand where the wounded girl woman came from here, who also searches for his father. However, Beer immediately recognized her and began to ask what she was doing here. The girl recognized this voice in the same way. Adjusted to the friend of the face, the girl began to ask where his body, adding that she was very glad to see him. She did not allow the ant to answer, continuing to fall asleep him with questions, which he could not immediately answer. The demons were surprised that for some reason she was familiar with their enemies, and they will have problems if she chooses them aside. Meanwhile, the girl smiled, unable to believe that Burra would meet here, because of which she had already erupted from her heart. The ant said that she was offering to continue the conversation on time later, but for now, she should take care of these demons. Meanwhile, the opponents first decided to get rid of the wounded demon, because for Stardust, they only need her blood. Su thought that somewhere he had already seen her, but was not sure whether she would cope alone, but Beer knew exactly the answer. Several ranked demons are not equal to her. Her name is Ail. She is a demoness and the eldest daughter of the House of Ladir. When the Lord destroyed the world of demons, he spared only her family, and her abilities are at the S-rank level. Hearing this information, the guy was in shock, because right now he will be able to see how they are fighting. But contrary to his hopes, the first blow to the girl forced her to drop her weapons and fly to the ground. When she landed next to the guy, driving on the slabs, Bear asked when she managed to become a weakle. Even the volume of her mana is not the same that before, but suddenly the girl cried, because something happened to her during this time. About 6 months ago, most demons in their world raised an uprising, but their family could not suppress the rebellion alone. Relatives helped her survive, but during the escape she lost a lot of blood and weakened. Bear decided that treating it was a waste of mana, and he realized that now he had 2 companions who had lost his strength. The demons first did not recognize her because she became much weaker, but they did not expect to meet Ladir who survived from the family here. And now they have a magnificent chance to become stronger due to the absorption of the blood of a noble demon. The guy thought that if he could fight with them alone, then one would certainly overcome. Suddenly, Beer decided to use the ability that he received after the restoration of part of mana. Pointing to Ail, BR used the skill of Severe Orders, which were supposed to increase its characteristics by 50%. But at the same second, another notification jumped out, which said that the side effect of madness was acting on Ail. The ant sent the demoness forward, but the girl rushed into battle without his instructions, not looking at the wounds. Sing seemed to be some kind of miserable, but now they will be able to fight one-on-one. The battle resumed again, but now on the side of the guy was an ally who did not absorb him Manu. Suddenly behind Ail, a younger demon appeared, who waved his sword, wanting to get noble blood. However, the blade did not have time to get to the target, because Suo at full speed intercepted the demons in flight. He threw the monster away from Ail and the rest of the demons, wanting to deal with him alone. He ran sharply in his direction. The guy intercepted the enemy's sword, after which he cut him in half on the Sovereign of Victory. His body was immediately ignited and it began to melt, and the system announced that he had killed a low-ranking demon. After the murder of the demon, the horn of the volcano absorbed his soul, because of which the damage of his gloves increased by 31%. Meanwhile, Isla tried to break through the shield of the demon, who was dissatisfied with the fact that the younger was killed. He needed to do something with this crazy one, when suddenly the skill of harsh orders suddenly ended. The girl fell in front of the demon unconscious, because of which he hesitated for a second, trying to understand what had happened. But before he had time to do anything, at the same second, the land got up to him from behind and grabbed him by the neck. This second was enough to decapitate the demon while he weakened the defense and vigilance. Having gone to the notification of the system, the guy missed the blow of the last demon, who threw him into the wall. The last survivor was unhappy that now the advantage was on their side, which worsened his position. When Brookie came out to him, the demon decided that not everything was over yet, after which he decided to retreat. He knew that the escape would not save him, because this guy was damn quick, so the demon came up with another plan. Instead of an attack, he decided to grab Eli, for the blood of a noble demon, which will help him become stronger. But as soon as the monster approached her, his hand was crushed by Suho, who could not allow him to do this. Thus, he was able to immobilize the demon, which made it possible to attack the demon in the forehead. When Ail opened her eyes, she began to complain that he was very rude once he acts with her in this way. However, she could not believe that someone, in addition to the master, could command shadow soldiers. The ant was sure that she was not Fidelity, so she did not recognize him, after which he offered to crush her brains. Having looked closely, the girl realized that she did not have many options, and the correct answer was too obvious. When the land and Rocky disconnected, the system said that now its level is higher than 20 and it can use the store. At this time, Aila could not take his gaze away from the guy, having learned a small child in him, whom Jinwoo held in his arms. She allowed turn to him as a young lord, having managed to distract him from the new option for a briefly. The guy was surprised that she turned to him in a similar way, while Brookie affectionately stroked Rocky. Ezel immediately recognized him, because he has changed so much, but now it looks just like Mr. Song Jinwoo. When the last words left her mouth, the girl fainted sharply, leaving the guy in confusion. Bear explained that she lost consciousness from overwork, still alive, so there is no need to worry. After that, the ant began to treat all the surviving hunters, who still managed to save. The system gave a notification about the completion of the quest, for which the guy was supposed to receive a generous reward. As a reward, he received 3 points of skills and 700 gold, after which he immediately opened the store. Now the guy can buy items in the window of the store for gold, where there were quite a few objects and potions. Make money, performing quests just like in childhood, when he received pockets, fulfilling small assignments. This thought prompted him to pleasant memories of his parents, causing an involuntary smile on his face. And since the system passed to him from his father, the guy decided to mentally thank Dad for pocket money. Reading the description for the therapeutic potion, the land was surprised that he could not transfer the subject to another. Then he suggested that he could drink her in order to thus bring her back to consciousness. Having uncorked the bottle, Suho began to slowly pour the liquid into the girl's mouth open, trying not to shed a drop. Beer was unhappy that he spent gold on a useless demon, but added that he had a good heart. Su decided to take her with him in a shadow dungeon, asking Brokey to grab the demons that they also defeated. Without thinking twice, the hyena grabbed the carcasses of 2 demons and laid the youngest on Rocky's back, after which they headed to the portal. Bear was surprised that the Lord did not go with them, but SUU had unfinished things in this place. He went to the Generation of Flame, thinking that they suffer, being covered by fire. Having waved his sword, he apologized to them, because only this can help them find peace. After a while, employees of the association reached the station, and one of the hunters began to carefully listen to the report. The bodies of the dead hunters were discovered in the field-type dungeon, but this was not the work of magic creatures. Deeper in the dungeon, they found a basement partially destroyed by a blade, which was very confusing. The hunter thought about the fact that there was someone else, in addition to magic creatures, and Lim decided to return behind him. But suddenly the man turned, starting to ask him about the SU, which was supposed to be in the team of the collection of this detachment. The guy honestly replied that he was his colleague who agreed to help, to which he heard the question where he is now. Lim guilty admitted that they ran away from the dungeon and he evacuated him to a safe place. It is a shame to admit, but they were hunters of E rank and were able to only ask for help from the Association of Hunters. The man praised him because he made the best possible decisions in accordance with the leadership of the association. Then he turned sharply, loudly ordering to carefully search the station for any traces. However, Lim was absolutely sure that the one who saved the surviving hunters was Su Ho, who went there alone. The guy did not know why he was hiding his rank, but this was definitely not done with bad intentions. Meanwhile, in the shadow dungeon, Ail came to her senses and could not believe that everything turned out that way. Mr. Song Jin-woo decided to leave the Earth in order to protect it from invaders from the outer space, and Bura sent to the ground to remove the seal. But the young lord turned out to be a genius and coped himself. Looking intently at the girl, Su decided to once again clarify her name, because it seemed to him that they had already met. For the first time, their meeting took place during his training, and he promised to remember it, but now, apparently, he forgot about it. The guy seriously thought that for some reason he could not normally recall those events. Suddenly he remembered that in that dream that he was a training, he met this girl, but was in a hurry. At that time, she surrendered at the meeting, and Beer was outraged that she answered so inadequately during the test. However, now the ant was more worried about why she was so weakened, and what happened in the world of demons. After the clan Rydir took first place in the world of demons, called the Castle of Demons, Jin-woo began to expect. For several decades I have not lived peacefully since the master did not call them. 6 months ago, a problem arose. Among the demons, the mana amplifier called Stardust suddenly began to spread. It is not clear where he came from. Suo immediately remembered that the demons with whom he fought were talking about something like that. If a stelly dust is used by a low-ranked demon, its manu will increase without any effort. Therefore, during the absence of the master, the demons began to unite with the aim of rebellion against the clan Radir. And then the uprising that flashed on this basis grew into a full-fledged war between the clan and the rest of the demons. Her clan fought to the last, protecting the castle of demons, which Mr. Song Jin-woo entrusted them. But they did not have the strength to suppress the uprising, and after 6 months of the war they were defeated, because of which few managed to survive. However, the demons did not stop there. They seized the members of the clan and began to pump blood out of them to gain great power. So her father and her entire clan died, so she weakened, having lost her strength along with the liters of blood that she took away from her. She remained the only survivor, and does not even know what the master will tell her, learning that the world of demons is captured. Suddenly, Ail's eyes widened in surprise when Suo praised her, because sometimes he thought what his father would do. In this situation, he would say that, to her and the members of her clan, who fought to death even in his absence. Even the guy himself decided to thank her for fighting for the sake of his father to the very end, without retreating. Then he added that he would try to help than he could, after which he offered to return to the Raiders clan. Ayla remembered how the dream Jin-woo offered her something similar, and in the same way the name of her clan came up. Suddenly there was a notification where the last survivor of purebred demons, Radir, thanks the player. With a smile on her face, she corrected his mistake, and the system suggested recruiting Ezel as an ally. Suho was dumbfounded by the fact that Ezel the second in a row then to the lord with whom he must conclude an alliance. Most likely this was due to the fact that in addition to her there were no more purebred demons of aristocrats. The guy accepted the proposal, after which he received the energy of the descendants of the Lord of the White Flame. The girl also had a window, because of which she was dumbfounded, because I never saw anything like it. Rocky does not know how to speak, so he did not know. But the allies of the Suho also have a window of the union. Ezel became him, since she was a descendant of the Lord of the White Flame. But the girl was surprised, because she did not know about it. After some time, they went outside, as the guy was eager to test the new abilities of Ail. He turned to the girl, offering to test them with her a new skill. She embarrassed, but agreed. Ail immediately changed her appearance, starting to drink the guy with energy, which he immediately felt. While Suho was surprised to consider his hand, from which energy oozed, Ail fell from exhaustion. Her face looked emaciated, because of which she asked for forgiveness, because this skill completely devastated her energy. The guy was surprised that after the first time she was already in this state, and did not imagine what kind of power it was. Lying on the ground, Ayla realized that the young lord was transmitted to her strength, then fully exhausting. It was interesting to check how great the power of this force was, after which he decided to hit the building. Leaving only a small dent, they along with Beer looked at the wall with surprise, finally disappointed. It was even weaker than his usual blow, and was slightly different from his connection with Rocky. But for this, Ail paid with his energy. This is probably due to the fact that the percentage of charging at 0, but here is not a way to raise the level of charge. Suddenly, Beer turned to the owner with a request, asking to eat the bodies of the demons, which he transferred to the Dungeon of Shadows. The guy wanted to keep them in order to then extract their shadows, to which the ant offered to do it right now. Stretching his hands in front of his bodies, Su gave the command to rebel, but surprisingly nothing happened. Suddenly, a notification jumped out, saying that polluted mana was discovered and the extraction of the shadows is impossible. Jin-woo was also unable to extract the shadows of demons, whose souls are dirty, so he called them like a radier. Since they have polluted souls, Sing without hesitation suggested that these bodies be, who was very grateful. While the ant was busy with a meal, Su decided to devote a little time to a girl who spent so much effort for him. The guy suggested that Ailey drink a healing potion, but the girl's turned out to be that she was only bothering him. However, she has nowhere to go now, so she can use this part of the territory as she is convenient. Su gave her the right to the territory, because they are now allies, so you should not think about such trifles. At that very moment, they heard Bara click, who, with a frowning face, looked through the memories of the demons. He was able to find a clue associated with the Apostle Itarim, which could greatly dumb the owner. After a couple of minutes, Suho, Aila, Rocky, and Brookie sat next to his friend, wanting to carefully listen to Bura. The ant, flying in front of them, decided with their permission to tell everything that he saw in the memoirs of demons. However, before he moves to his story, they should find out something important. Stardust spread on the ground, and the source of the darkness is a monster of the outside world. It turns out that stardust spread not only in the world of demons, but the source of darkness. These are not monsters from the dungeon. Is it a coincidence or not? But the demons he ate were associated with the Gwyn Guild, which were on that grief. These demons receive people through the guild, subsequently infecting them from the source of the darkness and receiving stardust. Stardust is produced not only in this place, but also in many others. They are called stardust factories. If you make a conclusion, the guild that abducted people and the guild that transferred these people into slavery are closely connected. Also, do not forget about the factory, which with the help of man produced stardust, was Itam behind all this. This was clearly somehow connected with the invasion of Itarims on Earth, but all this looked very strange. It was also surprising that there is a person who created this whole system for the production of stardust. There is an apostle Itarim who is hiding somewhere on this earth, and the person who helps him in everything. This is the deputy head of the guild of the Reaper Li Ming Sleep, and if you find it, they will be able to find out about the apostle Itarim. It was decided to find this person in order to try to catch him in direct connection with Itarim. At the same time, a crowd of journalists gathered near the building, waiting for a specific person to come out of him. A minute later, Li Sleep came out, next to which 2 bodyguards walked, saving him from reporters. Journalists asked for an interview, asking what happened to the investigation of the case of hunters. It was interesting to everyone whether it was true that the Gian Guild abducted people, and many dead were discovered in the dungeon. Their Guild of the Reapers, after the cataclysm, which happened 2 years ago, tries to do everything that depends on them. And the sponsorship of the Ginnan Guild was in order to make their D-Rag hunters serve for people. And the field-type dungeon was under their leadership, since it would be difficult for new guilds to manage it. He could not think that actions with good intentions would be perceived in such a terrible way. If he had paid more attention to this, then no one would have suffered, but all the fault is now lying on it. Through tears, the man brought his deepest apology for anxiety, after which he headed into the car. The journalists decided that all the charges were false, because the association said that they were innocent in anything. Everyone was sure that the Reaper Guild worked for the good of the people, so they can be considered real heroes. Min Song was pleased that it was still in good shape, because the game of such a level is nothing for the actor who entered the top. He figured out this, but he could not think that the old man from the Association of Hunters would send him without any interrogation. But this meant that the association is not yet aware that it is a distributor of stardust. At the same moment, not far from him, Suho hid, who decided to consider closer to the man, which Bear spoke about. However, right now the ant did not feel any connection of this person with Itarim. This could mean or that Itam does not control him, and he does everything of his own free will. Having frowned, the guy decided to find out everything as soon as possible to put an end to their stupid plan. But suddenly Burr stopped him, although he knew that recently, Suho became several times stronger. But this time he will put on dancing his own life and will not allow him to go to rash acts. At that very moment, Ming Dream turned sharply, glancing at the wall behind which Singho was hiding, after which he got into the car. The magical power that came from Li Min's son would not allow the guy to confront him with his current level. After a while, being in the club, Ming Dream looked into the phone, where public opinion in relation to him changed dramatically. In the news, the Reapers were recognized as innocent, and the actions of the guild were revealed to the public. At that very moment, a girl entered the hall, who maliciously called the man a hero in the world of hunters. At a time he came, then it was necessary to first tell her about everything before her achievements are amused. She took all the others to the exit, adding that he did not have to report to her about everything. The girl knew that he had a complex character because this guy since childhood was with a gold spoon in his mouth. In addition, even in his youth he became a celebrity, because of which he developed great pride. But even when his pride was trampled, this did not prevent him from solving this trouble. After the disaster, the celebrity of Min Song was awakened in the rank of A, which became a widely discussed topic in the public. But his driver Tae-gu turned out to be one of the few awakened S rank, and their places in the hierarchy changed in the blink of an eye. However, for some reason Ming Dream joined the Reapers, which Tae-gu directly created. Then the girl asked him to tell more about the stardust, which he is now engaged. This time she wanted to buy largely, but the man lost the carriers and one of the factories. However, she did not believe that the deputy had no way to establish deliveries for an expensive client. Min Song decided to try to sit on a business partner, although he was not glad that he would really have to look for him. This little one has not been listening to him recently, and as far as he knows, he does not need someone's special permission. Meanwhile, the Suk Suk team hunted goblins to fulfill the daily quest and increase the level. The monsters were not able to do anything. They had no choice but to die at the hands of the hunters. When the first horde was behind, the guy again used a flute to call the next. It seemed that the master was nervous because of their recent conversation, which was seen from his behavior. Their goal is to get information about the apostles from Min Sun, but it is dangerous to make contact with him without being ready for battle. If he does not tell them himself, Beer will simply eat him and check it, because Vladika allowed him to eat people if they are villains. But this is only if you defeat him, because when BER visited the Association of Hunters, I saw many different people. If you estimate the rank based on its sensation and strength, today the young gentleman is the hunter of the rank S. Rocky was a rank D and Ezel C, but this is only because she lost all her strength due to the torture of demons. But when the younger lord is instilled by Rocky, he barely reaches B rank, which still cannot be compared with Min Sun. There is also a difference in the strength of representatives of the same rank, but on average, in order to defeat C rank, you need 10 D wrangles. This means that they are not enough for the strength to defeat the Guild and Lee Min-sun with his rank A. While Il and BR argued among themselves about why the ant went down from the rank of marshal to the ordinary, Su took the award for the quest. This time the account does not increase, even if it wins much more goblins, and the hidden reward was one time. Then he decided to open a random box, and the system notified that he received an ash ring. It was a magical subject of D rank, which increased the perception of the owner of 5 units. The guy immediately put him on, surprised that the system again gave him the subject of equipment. However, this does not really affect the state of affairs, because it will not be saved by some 5 points of perception. From some point, he will no longer be able to raise the level by hunting for goblins, because they will end. And demon hunting increased the damage from the horn of the volcano by only 3%, which is not particularly noticeable in real battle. Su wanted to grow faster, but the funds were not enough for this, so he would have to go to the dungeon. A little later, looking at the tablet, the guy noticed that today he was invited only to the teams of gathering and prey. The hunter of his rank and really will never take in a shock detachment, but entering the gate without permission is considered illegal. He also could not have a revaluation in the association, because then this information will be published on the site, which he would not want. The apostles of Itarims are on Earth, so that they cannot learn about its existence, and he himself has become a weakness of his father. He cannot even defeat Min-sun, and if the apostles are also connected, then there is certainly not to see victory. However, Beer was sure that he did not need to worry too much about the apostles. If they arrive to Earth faster than him, then they are now not particularly strong due to the influence of spatial movement on them. To move between measurements, it is necessary to go through a break, but a break of music, which is why indignation is created. Even if you expand the break by force, it immediately narrows back, which is why you have to spend a lot of magical power. For this reason, the army of Itarims cannot attack this universe, and the Lord is easy to get here. It turns out that weaknesses arrived here, which are able to quickly carry out spatial movement. Now it became clear why they did not appear personally, but used Brookie and demons as labor. If one day Itarima invades here, now is the right time for the growth of the Su-Ho, so as not to let it come true. BR again remembered how Jin Woo gave him permission to independently decide on arrival there. Then he handed the key to the shadow dungeon that if she achieved help, he could take it to him. A man with a smile added that he will definitely help in many ways to protect the Earth from invaders. This was another reason why Vladika gave him the key, so he decided to use it now. But as soon as Beer wanted to turn to the young master, he abruptly jumped up and cried out, surprising the ant. Having taken out the phone, the guy remembered that there was a way to get into the gate unnoticed, without violating the rules of the association. A couple of hours later, Suu was in a high building where he was met by his father, who was glad to see him. He was wondering why the guy suddenly wanted to meet, because he did not think that he would come with a business offer. The man also noticed that Su-Ho grew strongly, noting that the guy offers him a very profitable deal. Beer, who looked out of the collar, constantly whipped the words of praise to the young master. Yu Jin-ho could not believe that Suo came to him to help him enter the gate. There was a virtual game that became so popular that it continuously held the first lines of the rating from the day of release. Who would have thought that the creator of such an unsurpassed game would be an ordinary immature offspring of the family of one conglomerate? The name of that gaming studio is Gene, and its general director was Yu Jin-ho. It was to him that some time ago, Su-Ho arrived, where the secretary met him in order to spend it directly to him. The director said that an important guest would come today, so they were ready to accept him as befit. The guy was the first time in the walls of the uncle of the company, which was due to which he was surprised by the vast office and staff. But even more, he was surprised that there were a lot of awakened around, who decided to become office workers. His interest was noticed by the secretary, explaining that not everyone who was awakened is to his liking to risk life in dungeons. They can also carry out tasks or security. There is one project for hunters that their company is engaged in. He could not be devoted to details, but the guy thought that they were simply writing a game about hunters. When they got to the desired floor, they were immediately met by a middle-aged man who was glad to see the guy. It seemed to him that they had not seen 100 years, and during this time a lot of water flowed, but the relationship did not change. The last time he heard about his awakening at the university, and now not only him, but also Ant about him. Su wanted this by the fact that he had so many things to fall that he could not contact more often. Jin did notice that he even had time to grow up, but in fact it was due to the intervention of the system. The guy asked his uncle to look at something, and he was surprised that he immediately got down to business before talking. Having picked up the tablet, the man noticed various tables and diagrams, deciding that this is a business proposal. He did not expect this from the Su, who really grew up, and now made him an offer with a minimum risk. Jin-ho understood everything, realizing with a smile that he needed an uncle who will help to enter the gate. The guy asked to book the gate and hire people, and he would give all the crystals that they will receive there. The director was surprised that the dungeons from D to C rank were on his shoulder, although he himself is a hunter of E rank. Jin-ho was also awakened, but even his strength will not be enough for the battle inside the gate alone. This idea was like suicide, because not a single hunter in their right mind does not go to the dungeon alone. He did not want to believe that the guy wants to go there because it is believed that his parents dragged it out there during the Great Cataclysm. The man asked him not to worry, because he still hires hunters to search for them, and they just have to wait. Suhu knew that the conversation would be reduced to this, and now he was forced to tell him the truth, because he could trust him. Without further ado, the guy with all the seriously in his voice announced that he was awakened, capable of increasing the level. Somewhere on the ground, invaders from the outer space are hidden, and stop them something. He must kill the monsters and pump. Only in this way he will be able to stop the tragedy that will soon affect their land. Therefore, he needs to get into the dungeon by all means to become stronger. Jin-ho did not believe his single word, thanks if he heard about the project, raising the level alone. Suddenly the man laughed, because he was sure that today they had a funeral in his uncle in the program. He could not understand how the guy found out this information, because this is the hidden plot of their next game. Awakened that sways alone, starting with the weakest hunters, in order to surpass S-rank over time. He had a chance to become the strongest awakened and save the world, but before that he will need to go through many trials. While Jin-wo thought about who had been wronged about this, Suu suggested that it was his father's story. The man said that his plan with his subordinates to play a joke over his uncle was not a success, asking him to prepare better. But at the same second, Beer appeared, answering that he had vague memories from the past world. Jin-ho in fright began to ask Su-ho about this monster, while the guy himself tried to understand when he managed to get out. Beer said that he was only a pawn in the hands of the Lord, but among all people he managed to see the most battles. Then the ant raised the key, deciding that it was easier to do what to waste time on very long explanations. Without wasting time, he inserted the key in the man's chest, said that this was a gift from the Lord. At first, the discouraged Jin-ho found himself in a completely empty space where there was absolutely nothing. But at the same second, a hunter came to the meeting, in which he recognized himself, but much younger. In the next instant, the memories of the time when he fought side by side with Jin-woo fought in his head. He saved his life, and also helped him when he was in trouble, and Jin-woo was a closer brother for him than his own. Jin-ho owed his elder, because it was thanks to him that he was able to get the approval of his father in a past life. The guy who was sitting opposite him decided that he would also consider him his younger brother. When Jin-woo woke up, tears began to go from his eyes involuntarily while he was trying to realize what he saw. Wiping his face, the man realized that in this world he again met with Jin-woo, and this was clearly of his will. Surprised, Su-ho immediately began to ask Bura what he did to him, but the guy had no reason for excitement. The point was that all his memories from a past life returned, so the man could not restrain emotions. A little later, Jin wanted me that Jin-woo had unlimited power, which was partially transmitted to his son. It is difficult to even think that it protects the world from the so-called Itarims, and even in another dimension. In order to stop the speedy invasion of the Itarms on the ground, it is necessary to become stronger as soon as possible. Even in such a path situation, he offers his uncle business proposal, being as pedantic as his father. But now it is time for a man to stop seeing him only a child and try to protect. After that, Jin-ho decided to accept his proposal, in response to which he received a joyful exclamation of the guy. However, Jin-ho, on the contrary, muttered, thinking that again Jin-woo decided to do everything alone. But the reason that allowed him to return his memory is that he again gives him a chance to help as a combat comrade. Jin-woo could safely count on Jin-ho because he will do everything possible to help his son. The next day, when the guy got to the gate, he noticed several people who looked not at all like hunters. These were the participants of the shock detachment, which was hired by his uncle. He tried perfectly to fill the required quantity. However, some doubted that they would pay 4 million without entering the gate, while the guy would really go alone. They did not know how confident he was, but should not have underestimated the gate. They asked to tell them if the guy feels that urgent help is needed, because they are ready to work. Even if some hunters looked weak, they could still help, everything they could. Su-ho only thanked them, after which he headed towards the gate, doubting that he would need their help. Father took a lot on his shoulders alone, still continuing to carry this load, so he will do the same. Calling Ale and Rocky, Su-ho felt the warmth of the intention of his father, who wanted to protect them. Stone monsters began to be shown in front of them, which were configured as hostile as possible. Getting into the combat rack, the guy firmly decided that from now on, he could not allow his father to do everything alone. Closer in the evening, when Ming Sleep arrived at the building, he immediately asked his subordinate to be ready. 3 months have passed from their last meeting, and now the time has come to visit this mysterious young man again. A man passing by recognized Min Sun, whom he saw in the news, because you can't take away from his own popularity. It was important for him to maintain the right image, so he smiled, showing maximum friendliness. My old man waved back to him and smiled, saying that he would cheer for him, the hero of all the hunters. Being the son of the vice president of the construction company, at a young age he made his debut in the entertainment industry. Later, fate brought him to show business, where he was nicknamed the Prince of Asia. But after the cataclysm, he made himself the name of the awakened A rank. It turned out that the golden times would never end, but at that moment his driver said that he had awakened the S rank. He was old, so he was thinking of going to Hunters, so soon he would stop carrying him. At a meeting with the Association of Hunters, they asked him to create his own guild, so he decided to invite Min-sun. The man did not understand how the ordinary drove could get a S rank if a person like him was awakened by A ranges. From that day, it seemed to him that something was wrong with this world, and everything turned upside down very quickly. The whole social hierarchy rolled upside down after a lousy cataclysm, and he is obliged to return it. Even if you have to stir your hands, working with demons, he must get what belongs to him. Looking at strange people, he advised them to stop grinning. I began to remove them by force. He was wondering where their boss, who did not even deign to greet him personally. Going a little further and hearing his name, he noticed a child with a familiar hair color and a vile gaze. He always considered this boy an alien because of his unusual appearance, which he had now read the book. The guy grew greatly from their past meetings, and he remembered him with a very small child, and his supply of mana also increased. But the boy has already said that he was not growing, but returns his lost forces after moving to Earth. So that interspatial movement does not create problems. He had to crush his main form to the unit. The first fragment arrived. He is in infancy, the weakest of them, so it arrived faster. After the arrival of the second fragment and the merger with him, the current he appeared, which is now standing in front of him. His memories remained, but the personality has changed in comparison with the one whom he knew not so long ago. Min-sun seemed too difficult, but he simply needed not to be kind with him. However, his personality was not interesting to a man. Instead, he recalled the promise that he gave him. The boy remembered fame, luck, and also the murder of a S-rank hunter Lim Tai-gu, which caused Min-song. He was satisfied with such an answer, after which he heard the question of what led him to him. Min-song was surprised that now he could not even come to his own house, but the boy asked not to come with all sorts of trifles. Now there was a problem in the production of Stardust, because the Gwyn Guild and the factory at the Seoul Station were destroyed. He wanted to come for the addition, but the boy was wondering if it was an ambush, and whether they recognized the reason. It was known that Gwyn was destroyed by a hunter in a black mask, although Ming Sleep assured that there would be no problems with the system of spreading problems. The man dismissed that nothing would work out if he hung up on such trifles. However, this behavior looked incompetent, and the mistake of the boy's previous personality was to choose it with his pawn. At the same second, Ming Dream pulled out a hidden knife, after which he incredibly quickly put him to the child's throat. He did not like that he was compared with Controlled Outfit, because he is a hunter of a rank who could kill him. Now he could do this until his strength returned to him, and he also did not consider himself his pawn. Awakers evaluate themselves only on the basis of mana, and apparently, this serves as an indicator of their strength. The next second, the boy used his ability, subjugating all the people in the building. Min Dream in shock noticed that mana began to spread everywhere. He could not believe that this child washed the brains of all people in the building, and now they are all under his control. The reason why the boy's previous personality considered him necessary was to survive. Now he has the power to survive, and their relationship may change depending on the competence of Min-sun. At this time, all subordinates in the room fixed their eyes on the man, starting to get the available weapons. Having thrown the knife to the side, Ming Sleep decided to squint in earnest, because he simply checked whether he could kill a S-work. Closing the book, the boy with a smug look decided it until he benefits. Then he presented him with stimulants, which were made through a 100-fold condensation of stardust. The man was pleasantly surprised by the goods, because if you dilute it, you can get a huge amount of dust. True, the effect differs from the one used by low-ranking hunters, and even manifests itself in A-ranges like him. Min-song did not dare to use what he knew nothing, because this thing can keep the danger in itself. Perhaps he released the unimaginable monster, but this is not his business. Only the boy's promise was important to him. When the man left the building, the apostle threw the book, feeling that another fragment would arrive soon. As soon as he absorbs a fragment of power, he will not need to hide anymore, and then he will be able to get down to business. At the same time, Su-ho and his team fought with a huge snake, whose scales were booking. While Ale and Rocky distracted him, the guy jumped, clasping the neck of the snake almost at the mouth itself. The comrade was observing him, but the hunter showed that he had everything under control. Having attached all the existing force, he wanted to crush the neck of the reptile with his bare hands, forcing him to writhe in pain. While the guy fought, the apostle was waiting for the time of the real invasion of the Atarims. Meanwhile, one of the members of the combat detachment of the SUH-HOD became interested in whether it was not dangerous. Each of them will receive 5 million simply for the fact that they are sitting here until this man comes out of the gate. And they explained that they accompany him for the 4th time and pay them without delay, but the girl still thought that something was wrong here. She was offered to quit this matter, after which she hesitated because the offer was too generous. The rest also have a suspicion because the boys do not take oars with them, mining units of collectors to clean the gate. First, he defended only the gates of the D rank, but now he set about S Thrand, and it is not clear what he was only doing there. At this time, the goblins waved a pickle violently, mining ore, while the bear drove them more diligent. Ayu, who was engaged in collecting along with Rocky, considered a comma that special skills were needed for this. At that very moment, she thought that Su decided to defeat the boss alone, and hoped that nothing would happen to him. Suu himself already actively fought with the monster, dodging his every deadly attack. Grabbing the dagger tighter, the guy used a storm cut so as not to apply a spider of injury. He hoped to activate the skill of paralysis, but the target was high resistance, which was due to which the effect was weakened. The guy had long been looking for an opportunity to try the effect of a dagger, but he does not work on spiders. Then he threw the dagger directly into the face of the monster, thereby distracting him from the main attack. When the boss looked away, Su hut sharply into the air, after which he clenched his fist, directing it to the monster. The blow was so strong that the spider's jaw was able to break, because of which he immediately disoriented. He had enough strength to fight alone with the boss of the C rank, which means that the gates of B rank are in line. It is already easier for him to use the rule of the ruler in battle, and he was able not only to increase the level, but also began to fight better. Suddenly he thought about using the rule of the ruler not for telekinesis, but to put an invisible hand on his attacks. Without thinking twice, he flew up again to find the weak point of the insect while distracting it. He gathered all his strength to deliver a decisive blow, thereby wanting to confirm his theory. The guy sharply changed the trajectory using the skill, after which the bullet flew onto the monster, trampling it into the ground. When the monster was defeated, the system immediately notified this, and in addition to this, the guy raised the level. The rule of the ruler was also improved, but this requires much more concentration, from which the Su Ho was quickly exhausted. A few minutes later, Ale and Rocky looked in surprise at the Mr. Dungeon, who came out of the depths of the depths. At that time, the guy thought that only with him his capabilities during the battle were truly limitless. He managed to kill the boss alone, while the collection team also finished work, and Beer chewed the stones of mana. The girl reported that they collected all the materials from the monsters, doing an excellent job. Having opened the store, Suho immediately began selling the materials that they collected, receiving gold for this. BR noticed that comparing with hunters among people, now the Lord was closer to the hunter of B rank. And also if he becomes stronger, then Essel from Rocky too, because their forces began to recover faster. The girl also wondered how she can restore her forces without blood consumption. At that moment, Suho was surprised to notice that he now sees their levels. Ale had level 19, and Rocky had 17. The girl did not understand how she raises the level because they are not players, like Mr. Jin Woo or Suho. They cannot distribute the points of characteristics, but still can become stronger through an increase in level. At the same moment, the guy suggested checking if they could increase his level than interested comrades. But they could not do this after visiting several raids, but they already visited 2 for today. Entering the Shadow Dungeon, Su decided to postpone them for a while and take up a daily quest. But as soon as they went through the portal, they were surprised to notice strange gates, an unusual red color. They could not understand, and where the gates came from in the Shadow Dungeon, and from which the unbearable heat emanated. The guy decided to clarify this with Beer, but he did not find an answer, covering his face from the heat. A sudden system announced that an urgent quest has appeared associated with a spatial fault. Suho was surprised because he had never come across urgent quests, but this only redressed him. Without thinking twice, the guy bought heat-resistant capes in the store, after which he handed them to Aila and Rocky. He just thought about another raid, so he decided that they were very lucky, after which he invited everyone ahead. At this time, a skirmish arose in the Egyptian field of the pyramid under the 2 groups of hunters. Ryo Singh from the Guild Asura was a West hunter, and now he was in a very unpleasant position. But he could not believe that they came here the first, but the other group asked them to simply leave the dungeon. A huge man with a scar on his face did not show much interest in his statement, issuing the last warning. This is a field dungeon under the control of their guilds, so any disobedience will be perceived as a declaration of war. Rio was unpleasant to realize that right now they were faced with the Guild of Scavengers. Randolph, who was a hunter rank, was sure that everything loses its meaning to absolute power. However, Rio was not going to retreat, after which he ordered his comrades to prepare for the battle. The other side was not going to give up so easily, so they began to do the same, exposing the weapon. Suddenly, all their concentration was dispelled by a guy who waved his hand, drawing their attention to himself. Turning around, they noticed 3 people, one of whom asked in a generally accepted language where he was. 30 minutes ago, Singhoi understood why the sand was taken over, because they fell into a deserted area. Bears felt strong magic emanating from the pyramid, which majestically stood in front of them. They also drew attention to extraneous objects that were not combined with ancient ruins. They headed to the cars and wire fences with which someone fenced this territory. Cars did not work inside the dungeons, but still they were here. Perhaps this is not a dungeon at all. Judging by the coat of arms of the guild, they could accidentally transfer to the other end of the world, which at first turned out to be impossible. But while the source gates remain in the shadow dungeon, there will be no problems, so you need to quickly check everything. The next second, the guy decided to go back, opening the portal, but when he returned, he was dumbfounded. Meanwhile, his shock detachment noticed that the gates were disappearing. The boss was dead, but he had not yet come out. Currently, the land was between two lights of different guilds, which are about to kill each other. They entered the pyramid but found people here, and this probably drove the car here. How long I heard their conversation, I realized that they have been talking in English. It turns out that he is in another country. No wonder he taught English while he was preparing for the university, which means he could talk a little with them. Rio was surprised that even the East decided to declare its rights to own this dungeon. The unfolding events seemed too troublesome to Randolph, because he did not know that so many worms were riveting here. He remembered that the leader of the guild talked about grandmother's prophecy. At the gate of the tomb from the destroyed press, life will appear that is born from death and is able to manage the dead. And immediately after her words in Egypt, a pyramid appeared, a field-type dungeon. Too successful coincidence. They needed to capture this dungeon, and after he would visit the raid. And if other guilds decide to intervene, you need to do everything in the best style of skaters. Therefore, the man decided to make a warning. If he is removed right now, he will be released calmly. He was aggressively configured, so the guy just needs to capture the dungeon to fulfill the quest. At first, everything looked pretty simple, but the man sharply and suddenly rushed on him on the attack. Suho, who was already in full combat readiness, said that he himself asked. Sharply changing the direction, he directed his fist right into the chest of Randolph, striking a strong blow. It was difficult to predict how strong his attacks would be, because the blow would have to be on the armor, so that he would not die. However, his blow was weaker than he thought, because the man immediately hit him on the face, throwing him into the wall. The man was unhappy that they decided to underestimate him, after which he ordered to kill the Asura clan and a narrow-eyed kid. Ale and Rocky immediately prepared for the fight, because this man dared to attack the young lord. Meanwhile, Suho began to slowly come to his senses, trying to realize the strength of the opponent. Hunters cannot but fight among themselves, but in order to fulfill the quest, they will have to defeat them all. Now he was sure that the guild of this man is his enemy, who needs to deal with as soon as possible. At that very moment, the SU hut fell out of the place and began to gain speed, after which he decided to attack one of the hunters. This man could not think that some kind of hunter bacon would trample against the screaming guild. Suho tried to cut him out, but he withstood, because of which he wondered how strong they were. Suddenly, he decided to take advantage of the rule of the ruler, as was made against the spider in the dungeon. But if he accidentally kills him, then there will be no problems, so you need to do everything carefully. And while the guy was thinking about this, a man arose in front of him, who immediately cut his throat to his enemy. Rio did it because he saw the guy's abilities when he dodged Randolph. However, now he was captured by doubts, so he concluded that the guy was simply afraid to kill. The monsters are not the only threat to the hunter. You must also be ready to fight with Falsarin. Singh thought that he had already prepared to fight for his life, but this is not enough. He still has not experienced the need for murders. Even in the battle with the hyenas, it was possible to get by softer. After all, the situations where either you kill or where the protection will consist in the murder, will haunt him further. They flew out of their heads, for all thoughts were about raising the level, which until today was erroneous. It is necessary to discard your way of thinking, which has developed before the cataclysm, and live according to new laws, so he can become those who can fight Li Min's son, who was now many times stronger. At this time, Rio Singh introduced himself to the guy, calling his guild, hinting at the partnership. They both were in a difficult situation because of the centers, so it is better to unite. Suho risked forward, swinging at him with his fist, but to the surprise of the man, he shook past, getting rid of the enemy. This blow was many times stronger because of the rule of the ruler. Now the guy decided to beat, not to hesitate. Randolph was surprised to notice that this kid practically killed a Ran tank with one blow. Meanwhile, Suho looked at him and introduced himself, after which he also offered to unite his forces. The scavengers noticed that the Acura Guild collaborates with another detachment of hunters, but this did not stop them. Even if small fish united, they still remained small fish. They believed that their combat capabilities were better, but SUU did not yet take advantage of his complete force. After that, he began to call on shadow soldiers, among whom a giant Arachnida of the Private appeared. Together with her, other dangerous shadows came out, which he subjugated when he cleared the last gates. Rio was in shock that with such combat skills he is a callingman, and even so many creatures calls at a time. At that very moment, the spider rushed into battle, because of which the tanks of the scavengers began to line up in the protective wall. Do not waste time. Randolph returned to battle to destroy a sudden monster with one blow. However, he did not stop there, after which he headed towards the guy who hit a lot. The spider became weaker when he turned into a soldier, but he was still able to defeat him with one blow. This person was the strongest here, so Singh was in a hurry to use the skill of communication with Rocky. But at the same moment, Ayla stopped him, because of which the guy had to be temporarily distracted. The girl suggested this time using the skill of communication with her, because they learned the secret in the gates of how to raise the charge coefficient. However, it was debatable to use the skill in the real battle, which they have never trained. Suddenly, there was some kind of noise behind her, and monsters began to fall out of the pyramid. People suggested that they came to the noise of the battle that they arranged here. Monsters also crowded from another entrance, so now all the hunters had to fight together. Seeing the living dead, Randolph only now understood the prophecy that the boss heard. The broken seal, born from the death of life, will appear in the grave, and she will have a force that can raise the dead. If the dead who were raised are those mummies, then the one that is said about is precisely in this call. The boss ordered to pick up the right to own this dungeon, so it is best to pick up the force that could raise the dead. However, deep down, he did not want to retreat right now, because he noticed an interesting person who was fighting now. In the end, the man decided to ignore other hunters to go to the boss's room. Rio shouted loudly to his comrades that the skaters entered the dungeon and they need to be stopped. However, the dead were blocked by the dead, who began to eat on them from all sides. They limit them with the help of monsters, and the passage was on the other side. At that very moment, the SU wanted to unite with Rocky, opposing the largest dead man. Entering a couple of slow attacks, the guy easily destroyed him and nearby zombies. The guy also offered to quickly figure it out and follow the scavengers. Rio looked at the guy in shock, with the difficulty of the door, that he not only calls, and also unites. Meanwhile, Randolph looked at the next defeated zombie, but he was overcome by doubts. This boy is definitely hiding something, and he wanted to fight him once after making the power to raise the dead. However, right now they were in the boss room, which was supposed to be the main problem. Opening the door, they found a creature that was connected by many chains. The hunter suggested that he was sleeping, so they decided to act as quietly as possible. It was chained in chains, but in the prophecy, it was said that the life born of death will appear after the seal was broken. Suddenly, the monster raised his head slightly, starting to speak something in the previously unknown language. The hunters immediately guessed that it was the language of monsters, but did not expect him to speak with them. Realizing that people do not understand him, Monster immediately strained his hands in order to try to get rid of the chains. Randolph immediately ordered everyone to prepare for the battle, because the boss wants to get out. At the same moment, the chains began to take a loud ringing, breaking out of the walls and attacking the hunters. Many did not have time to react and set the shields, because of which they were immediately defeated by one sharp blow. After all a moment, only one man remained alive, who managed to put the shield in time. Their tanks, known for their stamina, this monster broke with one wave of their chains. Suddenly the creature screamed loudly, which briefly discouraged Randolph. Perhaps the monster asked him to attack, but that the one that was, both looked at him high. The next second, the man decided to use the skill of giant armor to increase his protection. Without wasting time, he tried to attack the monster, which he again began to rotate with his chains. However, the monster did not even move from the blow in which he used all his strength, and did not show signs of pain. Meanwhile, the creature continued to say something. As it turned out, he apologized to the master. He needed to wait for him before freeing himself from the shackles, but now he had no choice. Having abruptly thrown off part of his strength, the monster threw the man up, thereby finally defeating him. The monster did not expect that the first living creature that would meet him would break at a time after their game. It was not scary because somewhere near the exit someone was still alive, with whom you can play a little. Meanwhile, the dead people did not see the end and edge, but it did not matter how many land he would take with them. He decided to resurrect those dead. The system said that, however, old souls could not be extracted. It was a shame that this ability does not work on mummies, and this thing has much more restrictions than he thought. Suddenly, the earth began to shake and collapse under the hunters, leaving everyone out of balance. The next second, huge polings appeared in front of them, which were more dangerous than mummies. Then, the even more fierce battle began, during which Ale decided to attack the insect. However, her spear could not break through the shell of the monster, because of which her attack did not pass. Rio could not believe that they gave way to ownership of the dungeon of the Guild of Scavengers, but they needed to retreat. But in the description of the quest, it is said about the search for the cause behind the gates, and it is not clear whether the quest will end if you kill the boss. Suddenly, not far from them, another monster appeared, who attracted the attention of all hunters. It was the same prisoner who got out of the bowels of the dungeon, and now slowly went outside. It was precisely this passage that the Scavenger Guild took advantage of, but a new monster appeared from there. Perhaps the point was in the perception of the SU, which increased with the level, but now he definitely felt it. It was clearly a boss of the dungeon, imprisoned in the tomb, a Muth, whose name burned red. Suddenly, the monster ordered all the mummies to disappear, because of which they immediately executed the owner of the owner. Io was dumbfounded by the monster's voice, ordered them to be removed, and the mummies really retreat. She wanted to say something else, but Amuth sharply landed in front of her, forcing her to shut up. The boss was surprised that she understood him, but the girl replied that she was primarily a demon. After countless numbers of undead day after day and grumbling insects, he did not expect that he could talk with someone. Io was surprised that he was more friendly than it seems, but at that time, a multi-leaf attacked her. Amuth decided that this creature would not interfere with their conversation, after which he destroyed it with one wave of his hand. The girl looked at this picture in shock, unable to shoot that he killed in millipede with one blow. The boss said that before the conversation he would kill the bees, that they do not even understand the simplest team to get out. The next second he soared into the air, starting to destroy insects one after another, without any problems. Other hunters hardly realized what was happening, because they did not understand whether they would be happy that the monster helps them. Suo for the first time saw the monster to kill his own kind, because he always thought that it was impossible. Meanwhile, the multi-beings tried to attack the boss, even despite the death of their own kind. Of these, he managed to eat Amuth, but at the same moment he regretted it when he began to break out from the inside. The boss hated insects, and therefore was pleased that he could destroy them in this way. The hunters who stood aside did not even dare to breathe in, looking at what was happening. Rio did not understand why such a monster appeared here, because the dungeon was supposed to be with or in Rang. Looking in his direction, Amuth decided that then no one would talk to him, that he was very upset. Having dealt with the Pollinates, he decided to attack the hunters who were here uninvited guests. The man put up swords for protection, but at the same moment the guy who threw the boss came to his aid. The guy did not understand such principles, to kill only because they did not understand him. Amuth was pleasantly surprised that there is still a person with whom you can chat. However, he did not care about the principles, because of which he sharply counterattacked, hitting right on the suns. The blow was so strong that he raised the veil of dust, and the guy was thrown into the opposite wall. Ale shouted loudly, asking the monster how he dared to attack the young lord, which he was surprised. It was difficult to call this an apology, but he decided not to kill her, because she may know something. He was wondering if the war ended between the Shadow Monarch and the others, and who came out the winner. Eli became interested what kind of monster this is about the Monarch's war, and he continued to demand an answer. At this time, the girl looked at Sue and Rocky, which were unconscious. Amuth was unhappy that human creatures did not understand him, and the demon refuses to answer. It doesn't matter why they did this, but now they had to die from his hands. The boss wanted to finish Aidi, but Suu on time accepted the award to restore status. He was very lucky that he held a reward for a daily quest. And now he could tell the monsters about the War of the Monarchs. With a smile, he stated that all the monarchies were killed by a shadow monarch, thereby dumbfounding Amuth. While it was imprisoned, the war ended, and judging by the issues, he is one of the subordinates of another monarch. This is a crocodile muzzle, at least a S rank. It is definitely not worth pouring it, because you will immediately die in place. The monster tried to realize that in the end, he defeated the shadow monarch and thought about the death of the rest. Suddenly, he got angry when he realized that she had an iron body. Tarnak also fell from his hand. It was not difficult to guess that Amuth was a supporter of the monarch of an iron body. He only asks about him. Such a layout of events did not really like the guy, because this promised many problems. Amuth can be very angry if he finds out whose son he is, but the monster has already swung his foot on him. Isle screamed in hysteria, watching the monster's leg sank into the place where the guy just stood. The guy dodged, but the monster said that he was responding slowly. It means herself, after which he asked not to hesitate. This reptile had simple conditions for the murder, but he asked again. The monarch of the iron body from his hand died. Sue hoped that he would not fall into rabies, learning about the death of the monarch, after which he answered affirmatively. But at the same moment he shuddered, felt terrible power, while Amuth agreed that the monarch stopped visiting them. So, in the end, he died, and it is worthwhile to thank the monarch of shadows for this, after which Amuth laughed. Sue was surprised that the monster is not a subordinate of the monarch of an iron body. He was also surprised by such nonsense, after which he swung his fist, wanting to strike a mortal blow. The guy put his hands in defense, but suddenly discovered that the monster stopped the chains that constrained his hands. Amuth realized that he had crossed the border, because of which he could not go further, so the guy was safe. When the chains began to drag him back into the dungeon, the monster began to curse Tarnak and the sorcerer. Su, Ho in shock watched the chains that took from nowhere and dragged the monster with them. He did not understand what happened here, but they were definitely lucky that he did not have to fight this monster. Since now they know the existence of this monster, you need to act with caution and provide everyone with first aid. Suddenly, the guy shuddered. He felt that something was happening with the quest, and the notifications began to be buggy. Noticing the unusual behavior of the master, the girl decided to ask what was the matter. As it turned out, now they needed to enter the gate and release the descendant of the iron body from the pyramid. When they entered the dungeon, they noticed the guys from the Guild of the Scavengers, with whom Amuth figured out. Suddenly, a constrained monster gave a voice, saying that he, like a person, not to occupy the courage, since he came to visit him. However, this time he came to talk normally, because killing someone at a minute whim does not look like a normal conversation. However, this is the only thing that Tarnak taught him, and if he wants to look for the perpetrators, then let him blame for that dead geek. Su seemed to look at the cruel, but still an honest child, who was supposed to take into his allies. Ahmed decided that since his body was constrained by chains, and he had nothing more to do, he will tell him. He was a creature created by the monarch of an iron body and a caster, who was eventually expelled into this tomb. They transformed him when he was an ordinary person, turning it into a terrible monster. Now he is thrown into a tomb filled with death and tied with miserable chains. Even if they break them, they will reappear. He should cross the border. Because of them, he is even inaccessible to the depths of the tomb. He cannot forgive Tarnak and the caster for the pain that they caused him with his antics. Now the task of the guy was to free Ameth, and it was necessary to do something with his chains. But how to get rid of the fact that it still appears again? If the matter is in hooks, then Amuth would have done something with them for a long time. Suddenly, he decided to clarify the monster that the monsters were found here before he was sealed. So the owner of the dungeon is not he, and the guy had to find a large iron door where the boss was. But it was not clear what the problem was to allow Ameth here to calmly wander, instead of which he was locked within the same room. If his assumptions are true, then he can help him get out in return for any of his requests. The monster agreed to do everything for the sake of freedom, but did not expect that the guy had a way to get rid of this magic. However, if this person decides to joke with him, then the consequences can be irreversible. From these thoughts, his chains began to crack and collapse, and anger to fill the soul of Ameth. Su hastened to calm him down, asking him to listen at first, because he sincerely wants to help him. After that, the guy announced that he would destroy the whole dungeon, which did not weakly surprise the descendant of the steel body. He cannot go deep into the dungeon because the caster did not want him to kill the local boss. But the land will kill him and destroy the dungeon, because what will become with the hooks that have lost their fastening? There will be no sense in the chains if the hooks do not fulfill their functions. This thought seemed to Amuth entertaining. When the guy left, he left Bera alone with Amuth, who was asked to stop flying like an annoying fly. The monster still could not believe that this child would be the son of the monarch of shadows. But he cannot go further, because a lot of time has passed since the descendant of the shadows left. If he cannot defeat the owner of the dungeon, then the plan will fail, and the chains will continue to constrain it. Nevertheless, his words instilled confidence in him. This guy, although he was weaker, but said as if the problem had already been solved. The next second, the monster lowered his head, remembering the one who found himself in this place. Tarnak created it, saying that the power of the flesh is true power, but even so, the creation could resist it. At that very moment, he sincerely believed that this boys really could rescue him from here. Meanwhile, Suo and everything fought with the pawns of the boss, which were just incredible sizes. And now the last, the same owner who sat on the throne, remained in front of them. The name of the guardians of the tomb, Sika, burned in red, which only proved its great power. A little earlier, Ahmed stood in front of the portal in the shadow dungeon, but the chains prevented him from entering him. Even the idea of leaving this place calls them again, which made this spell very nasty. But now they had two priority tasks: to destroy the boss, and with it the whole dungeon. And then get rid of the initial function of the chains, breaking their base, thereby freeing Amuth. As soon as they cope with them, the freed monster, along with Beer, join them. And if they fail at least one task, there is nothing more to count on. But in such a case, Su-Ho had a spare plan. Amut decided that what would happen, because what happened, is better than rotting here alone. And now the boss of the dungeon began his attack, wanting to destroy the uninvited guests. When there was a loud magic explosion, Su did dispel the veil of dust, sharply rushing into the attack. He used a storm cut on the sand, which all this time was chasing him, trying to bury himself in himself. The sands did not allow the guardian of the tomb to approach, and most likely his rank was, but no less. At such a pace, he will lose mana faster than him, so you need to deal with him as soon as possible. When the sands began to envelop him, the lands used the rule of the ruler to direct the spear abandoned by Isle. The boss repelled the weapon, but this second was enough to distract him for a while. The next second, the guy called on the girl to use a union skill that the girl had been waiting for so long. When they began to clean the gates, they learned that the absorption of the soul of the murdered monster charged their joint skill. And now she wants to show him what she had learned while fought with crowds of goblins in a shadow dungeon. Al began to share with his own strength, enveloping him with demonic energy while he was heading to the monster. But after a second, the entire pathos of the girl disappeared when she unconsciously fell to the ground. Now the charge of a demonic blow was 67%, because of which the guy decided to put all the power into one blow. He returned from the boss's fist. Su managed to strike directly into the body, after which there was a deafening explosion. Ahmed and Beer, who were very far from them, felt a shaking, deciding that they had finished. The dungeon began to collapse, which means that he managed to defeat the owner of the dungeon. Raising their heads, they noticed that the hooks that held the chains on the walls began to crumble. At that very moment, the ant led the crocodile behind him, heading to the young lord. Ahmed still could not believe that the chains no longer hold him, and he was finally free from Tarnak. But it was not clear why they chose him for their experiments, and all that was left was just memories of that time. Tarnak endlessly tormented his flesh, and the caster restored it again. Over time, his body is really strengthened. But his mind is not able to cope with pain, and changed. In despair, he pulled his eyes, finding pleasure in pain. Plunging into it, he only wanted to feel the grace of nature again that he had the opportunity to see in his youth. And while he retains his mind, he must remember that he became so out of his own free will. Suddenly, one of the hooks purposefully flew in his direction, sticking right into his side. The rest of the hooks then also began to fly in his direction, and they decided that it was better to kill him than to let go. Suddenly, Suho came to his aid, who began to beat off the approaching hooks at high speed. From 2 strong blows, his muscles overstrained, because of which blood poured from his feet right away. Then the guy decided that he would have to tear them out with the hooks, simultaneously opening the portal into the shadow dungeon. Suho immediately jumped inside, and the hooks rushed after him, rising up high above the terrain. At this time, Ahmet tried to understand why it was a guy, and why he sheds blood for him. Suddenly, the guy felt pain, because the bones could not cope with the load. But at the same moment, the monster came to his aid. Then the monster realized, looking at the young boy, why all the monarchs lost the shadow monarch. Amut, who was pierced by one of the hooks, asked if it would be enough to throw the hooks into the gate. After that, he suggested that they lay out on the full, in order to get rid of this magic with common forces. At first, he wanted to name him by name, but changed his mind and turned to him as a young lord. After a while, Bear flew up to the newly waking up Ai, who noticed that she was in a shadow dungeon. Suo sent her first, because she ended all the energy, but the ant asked her to be quieter. On the girl's questioning gaze, the ant explained that they were resting, which caused her a smile. Raising her head, she noticed Suho and Amuth, who became allies, and the urgent quest was fulfilled. At the same time, at the Association of Hunters, the president sat at the table and looked at the photograph of a comrade. The gates and hunters began to appear again, but thank you memories from the past world, he managed to quickly organize an association. The existence of Stardust means that what was not in the past world is happening now. She is able to increase Manu several rank hunters, and whether it is produced by a dream, but this is all that they know. It was doubtful that he was capable of working such a scale alone, and behind all this there is a real culprit. At the same moment, a man called him who was invaluable helped the Association of Hunters during the years of formation. This man was Yu Jin-ho, who asked the president of help regarding his nephew. With tears in his eyes, he shouted that recently the guy had awakened like a hunter, and now he had a trap in the gates. The man asked Jean Chal to help him, while the president immediately realized what kind of nephew was talking about. When this awareness came to him, the man jumped sharply, realizing that something terrible could happen to the land. Meanwhile, the members of the Asura Guild detachment sat in the car, taking breath after the battle. At that very moment, Ryo woke a smiling guy, in which he immediately recognized Suho. He announced that the dungeon was cleaned, after which he asked to bite the phone for a minute. When they returned to Korea, Ryu thanked him for his help, and the guy thanked them for the return ticket. They also helped him to contact his uncle, who could not believe that he went to Egypt for the sake of the gate. Uncle informed his acquaintance from the association and hunters, and it is worth visiting him in the near future. Ryu was surprised that the S-rank monster escaped and even allowed the dungeon to destroy. The guy decided not to tell him what exactly became with Amith, so he simply shared his joy. It was not possible to get rid of the chains by the result, and because of them he will not be able to leave the shadow dungeon. And since he was not able to remove the seal, then the monster has the right not to fulfill his promise. But he asked him not to worry, because he only needed to rescue him from the tomb. It seems that the hooks are now scattered everywhere. Its radius of movement has increased markedly. This is many times more convenient than crowding in a tiny tomb, and the guy noticed that he had changed. Suddenly, the monster grabbed the master, after which he flew onto the roof to talk alone. That feeling of the greatness of nature which he was so lacking, he can feel here again. Now Amit was ready to follow the guy, as promised, because he was able to free him. Due to the open gates in the shadow dungeon, and the urgent quest probably, fate itself brought him with Amuth. Meanwhile, Ryu thought about the abilities of the land to call monsters, fight and even transform, remaining in the west. He wanted to contact his guild and asked to dig up more information on him. Swabble managed to raise as much as 7 levels on the boss and an urgent quest, and now he could calmly pull the Aurang. This means that his preparation is almost over, and soon he will have a battle with Lee Min-sun. The time has come for a response to the Apostle Itarim, who had lived with impunity before. Meanwhile, the Guild of Knights discussed that they have grown a lot lately. Now they are already applying for the gates of B rank, and now they have much more office. All this thanks to the Stardust, which helped the hunters of C rank get into the gates of B rank. She is already traded in the black market with might and main, and the price also fell, but some believed that there was something wrong with her. They also heard that the associations of hunters are trying to push the law on the ban on stardust. It was strange, because it is more profitable to give them the hunters so that they would clean up an even greater gate. Although they should generally be a side effect on such small bipods like them, so I could not complain how much it would fit. At that very moment, several men drew attention to the door, noticing people who do not belong to the guild there. The first to enter the room was a boy with an unusual appearance, and after him a pretty girl and a huge man. The apostle menacingly asked the whole guild whether they belonged to them the rights to the gate in Inchin. The strongest hunter explained that it was a guild of knights, but the guy again demanded to give the gate to him. When he repeated his request for the third time, the hunter felt a strange surge of magical power. The subordinates of the hunter agreed with the requirements of the apostle, while Su could not believe what was happening. He began to ask why they jumped in bowing to him. The boy was surprised that there were hunters who did not consume stardust. After which he announced that from that moment, they all are forbidden to see and hear, after which everyone closed their eyes and ears. The hunter did not understand why everyone was indulging in the words of the kid, and he just wanted to talk to someone, besides that freak. Their creator wants to possess the world without the owner, and he arrived here to fulfill his desire. Song-Su pulled at the weapon while the apostle said that after arrival he was asked questions. All that exists is created to fulfill the desires of their creator, but people have different goals and move of their own free will. The man did not understand what he was talking about, after which he pulled out the sword, the order to return everyone to normal. Even if he is a child, then he is not allowed to do everything that will please, throwing such jokes. But he immediately stopped when the boy began to emit energy, asking if he had just slandered his creator. However, this did not scare the hunter, after which he rushed into battle, wanting to stop the strange boy. Using the strengthening, the apostle became several times faster, after which he cut the hunter for 2 in 1 fell swoop. The broken blade SPU stole the hypnotized subordinate in the forehead, but no one paid attention to this. The apostle again allowed everyone to see and hear again, after which he ordered to clean up here. Walking along the corridor, he noticed other hunters who gathered for noise, decided that some hunter raged. Passing by them, the boy ordered them to forget everything that they saw without even looking in their direction. It was not their free will, because everything that exists was created to fulfill the desire of their creator. However, the creation of the creator of this universe killed him of his own free will, which looked contradictory. After a while, being in the dungeon, the boy stood opposite the defeated monster, which was still alive. Now it was better to call him a spatial fugitive, wandering on a break. Surely life is full of suffering, when having lost the house, he is forced to wander here, but he is ready to give him a chance to recoup. Having thrust a stone into him, the apostle gave him an order to get out of here and rage as if he wanted. The apostle wanted to study this world more by doing this for the fulfillment of the desires of their great creator. Meanwhile, people from the association arrived at the red gate, starting to check the number of mana emanating from the gate. If you do not deal with the boss, a breakthrough into the dungeons can occur at any time. Besides, there was an unsuccessful location. But by order of the apostle, they will inform the association that there are no problems, and it is completely safe here. After a little time, the gates began to crack, and monsters began to slowly get out of them. Creating exists only in order to impeccably fulfill the will of their creators. As soon as the creator was supplied for boredom, and they immediately entered the battle with each other. He wish him anything, and they will fulfill his desires by any means, because this is the reason for their existence. However, one of their relatives died in another dimension, and they needed to get power over the world that he lost his master. Obeying God's will, they collected countless pilgrims from their world. After that, a huge army, they went on a trip to the world that lost their master. True, they required a huge amount of energy to transfer an countless army to another dimension. However, the interspatial corridor was already becoming more energy. A whole eternity would be required to cross the army, but the will could not be broken, so they were in this world. But there's something unexpected, something so strong that could give them a rebuff. They met the darkness itself, which went against their light, preventing him from getting into a new world without an owner. It was the abyss of darkness endlessly, and the region, which used the power of the dead to fight the army. Various creatures that had long died entered into the war against God's creations. Darkness and its creatures had a frantic force, which was incredibly difficult to cope with. But as soon as God's warrior fell in a fight with darkness, and once their fellow in arms rebelled and turned against them, the battle continued, their losses grew, and the troops of darkness only continued to increase their forces. The army was in a difficult position until the war went beyond its measurement. This darkness did everything possible so as not to allow them to get into the world that lost its master. And when the army plunged into the abyss of despair, unable to resist the darkness, God's messenger suggested something. They had a great opportunity because the darkness, who left the world, will have as not easy as it at one time. To his world, it is so easy for him to return due to the exorbitant amount of mana that he did not find in the forms of the life of this world. The first to enter the flame that were weak, but capable of infecting the flame of creatures without mana entered there. And the army considered that if you spread faith in this world, the number of believers would increase. With the help of such a sanctuary, they will be able to show a thirsty miracle, because of which everyone agreed with this strategy. Teal immediately divided his forces and skills into 5 fragments to personally get into this world. And the weakest of them took the rudiments of the creation of the flame and went to the world that lost the owner. As expected, a weak fragment was not seen in darkness, and he managed to penetrate this world without any problems. However, the fragment was faced with an unexpected change that was not included in his plans. Creatures, presumably devoid of mana in the world without the owner, somehow acquired it. Subsequently, it became known that Mother appeared in this world simultaneously with the incident, which was called the Cataclysm. Therefore, the first fragment decided to wait for the rest, and now successfully absorbed the second. Such unpleasant changes will occur just at the height of the war, but no more problems should interfere with the plan. And now the apostle needs to understand how strong the so-called hunters are, that they possess mana. This must be done in order to fulfill your assignment as a fragment of TL. And while the boy stood in the middle of the airport, there was a deafening explosion that made people panic. Stunned citizens noticed goblins and orcs who broke the wall, smelling prey. Everyone understood that there was a breakthrough of the dungeon, and someone was supposed to contact the Association of Hunters rather. When a monster with a huge marina margin begins to rage, a high-ranking hunter comes. The apostle would like to look at the skills of the S-female, when I suddenly noticed the approaching hunters. Both used stardust, but due to its small amount in their body, it did not have an effect. However, if you use the ability of Teal to strengthen this faith, they will immediately become controlled by him. The apostle ordered to immediately get out because they only interfere. They immediately completed the order. Meanwhile, monsters overtook people who did not manage to escape, mercilessly depriving their lives. As soon as a living girl held out her hand towards the boy, begging for help, but he ignored her. Creating exists for the creator, so the only reason to live is to fulfill the will of God. However, for some reason, people had their own desires. Perhaps they were not given desires that are inherent in the creator. He could not believe that such weak people are surpassing them. At that time, the guy running past shocked at a calm boy. At that very moment, Suho appeared, who only returned to Korea. Something similar had already happened here. The orc who wanted to crush the man immediately received a direct blow from the hunter, who managed to do on time. Now he could delay the monsters alone, so he asked the survivors to get out as soon as possible. The apostle drew attention to the guy who easily dealt with all the monsters that came across to him in the way. The boy immediately recognized the hunter in the black mask, which Min Sleep previously told him. It was he who destroyed Hyen. It turns out that this guy is the problem that tried to interfere with their great plans. Su did not pay attention to the boy, continuing to fight the monsters, who now carried a great danger. The Association of Hunters could not allow a breakthrough of the dungeon at the gate, where many victims are possible. However, he decided to think about this later, because first it was necessary to get out of here surviving people. The apostle felt that this hunter did not use stardust, and his strength along with Min Sun, or even higher. At that very moment, Suho lifted the killed goblins from the shadow of the killed, ordering them to help people that they could not get out themselves. The eyes of the apostle at the same second expanded from shock when he recognized the ability that this guy owned. It was the very power that darkness uses. It is not difficult to believe that there is a person who can use this force. If he is really connected with darkness, it becomes clear why he needed to attack the Hyena Guild and a Stardust factory. Then he decided to disappear from sight for a while, because he cannot allow him to find out about their presence in this world. While the boy was thinking about this, he did not notice how a huge Kamaz flew in his direction, threatening to blow up the airport. As soon as the explosion thundered, the apostle turned around, noticing behind a hunter in a black mask. Suo covered him with his body so that the explosion would not inflict any injuries to him, because he thought it was an ordinary boy. However, now all his attention was riveted as a huge monster who looked at him in surprise. Beer said that he felt the energy of Itarimov in him, and the guy suggested that they also put his hand in a breakthrough. Suddenly, the ant did not mean something, but he decided not to pay attention to it, while the apostle looked at him intently. Having decided not to be distracted, Su put all points for reaching the 35th level by force, raising it to 77. The next second, his fist and the fist of the monster collided, which caused a shockwave. The apostle was surprised that the hunter saved him, because for him, he looked like an ordinary human child. Let him use the forces of darkness. In comparison with the darkness itself, he is terribly weak, which did not make him a serious enemy. However, now it is not possible to evaluate its potential, because there is a feeling that it can become even stronger. The apostle was very lucky to meet him, so he decided to get rid of him as soon as possible. Suddenly, another hunter came to the airport, who used the magic of fire, decided to finish as soon as possible. The apostle turned in surprise, noticing the clots of the flame, which began to gather right above them. The next second, fireballs began to fall on all monsters, burning them to the ground. Suho was surprised by the fireball that appeared from nowhere, and which began to attack the monsters. This man killed so many monsters at a time that his strength definitely forced him to respect him. However, the guy knew only one hunter who could control fire and own such a force. This is a S-Rax hunter, Choi Jung-in, who was acting as calmly as possible. The man was unemotional, surprised that the boss managed to survive, praising him for the strength. After that, he began to create a fiery bow, pull it towards the face of a huge monster. The boss growled loudly, wanting to absorb the arrow that flew in his direction, but thereby he only entered into trouble. The fiery arrow flew through, destroying it, and now the situation with the breakthrough was settled. The surviving people immediately began to welcome the strongest weapon of mankind with a smile and gratitude. Suddenly the man began to turn around, because he seemed to see here a guy who fought here before his arrival. It was strange that he left without receiving his honors, but Su decided to hide specially so that he would not be opened. In addition, the apostle always acted secretly so that no one knew, but now he decided to attack the civilian in a similar place. It was obvious that something was plotting, and now the apostle begins to gradually leave his shelter. Toward evening, the apostle was in the house of Minsona, silently looking out the window, thinking about today's incident. Suddenly, a portal opened behind him, from which a third fragment arrived, to which he decided to report on the situation. This world was not as primitive as they expected, because of which many new intruders appeared in their plan. Among people there are those who have mana, and among them there are SWRAs that have great magical power. There is also a variable that we must get rid of, but the clot of energy did not want to listen to the continuation. The fragment decided to look at the memories after capturing the body, because he had already completed everything that was required. The apostle was surprisingly sad due to the fact that he would disappear without a trace when a new person takes up. But there is nothing to do. In the end, the execution of the will of the Creator is their main priority. All this was done for the sake of the great palace, so the boy immediately began to unite with the third fragment. When he did this, an adult guy appeared in his place, who in an instant looked at all the memories. He did not expect to see a creature with the same ability as the darkness with which they fought. However, the remark of the second fragment was fundamentally wrong, and he decided not to get rid of it. Because if you turn him to the follower, then they will be able to subjugate even the dead. When Suho got home, Bear noticed that he looked too tired, which was too obvious. Before he got home, his uncle caught him and continued his instructions for ages. He was glad that the guy wants to protect the earth, but his security should be paramount. However, the guy hoped that mom and dad would worry about him as much as Jin-ho. Then he decided to go to the Shadows dungeon, because he can rest later. Today the guy was very busy that he did not have time to complete the daily task and could not miss today's award. But when the land was in the Shadow dungeon, a shock was written on his face from what happened. The system indicated that all creatures of the other world were destroyed. Daily tasks are completed. As it turned out, Ameth in one night destroyed all the goblins in the dungeon, so now there was not one left. He simply delivered his dungeon from the henchless Tarnak hated by him, and kept his promise not to kill people. However, the guy was upset because if there are no more daily tasks, then his height will slow down right away. Suddenly, the monster offered him his help in making him stronger than inconsistently surprised. Initially, he was not so strong either. He just knows a good way to achieve good results. And at the same second, a new daily task appeared, which Su decided to accept without hesitation. The list consisted of 100 push-ups, became press exercises, squats, and 10 kilometers jogging. The guy was surprised at such a weak way, but the monster added that this would not be enough. Therefore, he will do all this, carrying it on his back, after which this reservation appeared in the system. Suo could not imagine this, because with his current size, it would definitely be difficult for him. But due to the fact that Tarnak regularly destroyed him, over time, he learned to control the physical state of his body. After only a couple of seconds, Amat became a little higher than Suho, and in this guise to the guy will be much easier. After that, they decided to start training, and the guy had already accepted the push-up racks, hoping for the monster. But as soon as Ameth sank on his back, the guy realized that only size had changed, but not weight. The rest of the company looked at the master, who could barely withstand the weight of such a monster. The land under it was completely destroyed, and it still needs to make 100 push-ups with such a weight. It will be painful because he does not know another way to achieve progress, except through destruction and restoration. Meanwhile, in the dungeon of the field type of surroundings, Paju was Ming Sleep, observing the generation of flame. Also with him was a monster with tentacles on his face, who urged a person to consider his contribution to this. The demon Murma, who was the managing factory of Stardust, recalled that the apostles saved both of them from a disgusting life. Instead of an answer, the man waved a blade, cutting off a few tentacles to the monster, but this did not bring him pain. Min Song was indignant that this demon dares to evaluate his life, regarding this for a threat. The man was interested in the whereabouts of the apostle, because Taegu would soon return, from whom he promised to get rid of. At that very moment, the demon handed him a golden stone, asking why he did not use it. The apostle was his savior, who appeared to him after the world of demons was destroyed by the Lord of the Shadows. He himself was expelled into a crevice between measurements. The apostle improved the poison of crazy blood and created stardust. Only thanks to this, they were able to destroy the family of traitors Radir, who did not want to give up to the very end. If Ming Sleep will serve him, it will definitely become stronger than now, and will definitely be able to overcome Taegu. Throwing a cigarette butt, the man replied that the demon did not know anything about the hunters of the S rank. Then he asked him to stop carrying sectarian nonsense, because he would not lead to this, and he would not use it. In response to this, the demon called him a fool, because that is why he always remains a loser. Min-sun needs to be tolerated until the little one kills Taegu and then reports to all associations. He firmly decided to return everything to his place in order to sparkle as bright as once in the past. At that very moment, standing at a decent distance, a girl that the man did not notice was watching him. She informed the president that Ming Sleep had just left the field-type dungeon in Paku. Most likely in this place they get stellar dust, so the hunter of Miho had to continue to follow him. Young-in, who was in the president's office, was surprised that they had already tracked Min-sona. During the breakthrough, the dungeon near the airport, all the staff of the association, who followed the gates, simultaneously lost their memory. It turned out that they took stardust, and the suspicious actions of the hunters are manifested in different places. Now that they have enough justifications, the association will officially prohibit stardust, and now they need to catch Min-sun and all those who are behind the production and spread of stardust. Having straightened his glasses, Young-in said that their hunters would help them with this business, for the good of mankind. Jin Chol recalled that Yu Jin recently contacted him and said that Su had returned unharmed. If this guy can also increase his level, then they will try to recruit him to the guild, like his father in a past life. At the same time, Suu writhed with tension and pain, numbering the 99th push-ups. When the 100th happened, his hands could not stand it, and the muscles and skin torn, starting to bleed abundantly. Amut, looking at this, continued to calmly sit on his back, not trying to help the master somehow. The monster was surprised that the Lord was exhausted by this, and the rest in shock noticed that he had both hands broken. While BR was indignant at Amith, forcing him to finish training, the guy opened the store at the last gasp. His comrades immediately froze and stopped their skirmishes, paying attention to him with surprise. Having dried the potion of health, he thought that even for the better, because he just wanted to become stronger to fight Min-sun. He had to complete 3 more tasks, so Suu firmly decided to continue the harsh training. When the press began to make a press, he decided to unite with Rocky in order to slightly alleviate his task. After each exercise, he increased the number of healthy health, but this did not always save. After only 2 exercises, countless banks were lying on the ground, which were devastated. Amma did not imagine that this guy could withstand training, albeit using abilities. The young lord will never give up, will always find a way out of any situation, and someday Tarnak will surpass. When the exercises were over, Rocky, who left the body of Suho, could not even stand on his paws. The guy himself was so exhausted that he ignored the notification of receiving a quest reward. This was the end of today's training, but the guy had no strength to even move his hands. The training was hellish, but thanks to her and a reward for the quest, he pumped the skill of resistance and power per unit. It is unknown if this is a good thing, but it will definitely become stronger if the daily task is easier. Therefore, he showed Amouth a thumb, offering to continue tomorrow in the same spirit that satisfied the monster. When Suho got home, he was exhausted to sleep, and Beer carefully covered him with a blanket. Suho fell asleep immediately while the ant and praised him for the great work that he did today. But now, since there was a free minute, it's time to watch a little TV that I liked it so much. The news reported that the association reports the creation of a regulation for field-type dungeons. The association will accept immediate actions against the Guild Reaper and other guilds owning field dungeons. The next day, Ming Sleep carefully studied the document that people from associations provided to him. Since his guild owns too much field-type dungeons too much, they cannot ignore this. Higher leadership ordered to clean the guild belonging to the guild and the Reaper dungeon of the W rank in the Faju area. And also more than 6 months have passed since he was hunting, so he is obliged to take part in the raid in order to extend the hunter's license. The man was sure that Jin Chol was trying to insert his sticks into the wheels because it was there that the largest factory was located. He had to refuse, even if he had to be at enmity from the association, but his colleague decided to satisfy their request. The workers immediately thanked the head of the guild for the consent because in this way, they facilitated their work. It seemed obvious that they were impeccably obeying the requirements of the association. Min Dream realized that he had so suddenly returned from a foreign business trip to prevent his plans. The association will direct its raid hunters in Faju, so the Reaper Guild was to form a joint detachment with them. When the guests left, Ming Sleep immediately began to ask if the chapter understood how expensive the field-type dungeons However, Taegu was sure that the purpose of the association was different from that to get rid of the dungeon and field type. Most likely they learned about his secret, and he said that it was not worth underestimating their competence. Not only did he neglect his advice, he also dared to use the guild members at his discretion in his absence. The chapter was angry. Ask if Min Dream thinks that he is still his driver, who removes all the dirt behind him. At that very moment, Taegu wrote a recruiter who said that a new S-rank hunter appeared in Korea. He decided to go in person to pay an association's visit, asking him to prepare for a contract for hiring a new hunter. In the end, he added that the situation can still be corrected, and you need to do everything possible to put things in order here. Min Song was furious from the fact that the morons, who was lucky to become a S-rank, always builds himself out of himself. But he could not wait for this alien child to grow up because the new fragment had to appear. While he was thinking about the murder of Taegu, his phone turned on, and when he looked at the screen, an ominous smile appeared on his face. On the screen there was a matured apostle who was now in the association and clearly conceived something. Meanwhile, reporters from the side watched him, discussing the appearance of a new S-rank in Korea. Everyone was beside themselves with happiness, and everyone longed to interview him to find out what kind of guild he wants to enter. At that very moment, a man in a white suit came to him to congratulate the new S-rank, Pak, to the Jin. It turned out to be Chve Young-in, who was the head of the Guild of Hunters, who attracted enthusiastic views. The man had the feeling that they had met before, but the guy saw him that this did not happen. Going right to business, Young-I decided to invite him to join the Guild of Hunters, for which he had already received gratitude. Suddenly, the apostle sharply waved his hand, announced that he had already chosen the guild, so it would not work. The guy pointed to the car, from which Taegu had just got out, who was almost late for an important meeting. A week later, a detachment for raids was assembled, a field dungeon Faju, consisting of a guild and association. Pek Min Ho, a hunter A rank, was here at the request of the association to help with cleaning the dungeon. Min Song, who also participated in the raid, thanked her for his help, noting that the field dungeons were delivered to them. The girl realized that all this was just an acting game, but tried to behave at ease, as if she did not know anything. This man skillfully hides inner rot due to external kindness, but everything that happens in Faju is revealed today. Min Ho wanted to tear his mask with his own hands to hold him accountable for all his atrocities. However, a new S-Rag hunter who joined the Reap, Pak to Jean, was an unexpected variable. If something happens, then she has something that will help her detain Minsona at all costs. When the shock detachment headed forward, a detachment of miners followed after them, each of whom picked up the instrument. But the most unexpected was that Su Ho, which could not miss this opportunity, got into the detachment of the miners. A few days ago, Ming Sleep again met with the apostle, noticing that he had matured again from their last meeting. His choice fell on the younger body to facilitate survival at first, but there is no more need for him, since he collected enough fragments. However, the man was more interested in the name Tajin, which he never used, and decided that the guy wants to become a hunter. But this was just a name for presenting in public, because having become a hunter, he could afford to do things outside. Due to the incident that he made at the airport, the associations of hunters sat on the tail of Minsona, throwing his guilt on him. And if the association reveals a factory in the Faju area, everything can end in a deplorable one for them. The apostle asked him not to worry, because he joined the Reapel Guild just in order to prevent this. He will turn all the hunters who will go to the raid, and as soon as this happens, they will not be able to find anything. It was a strong move from the very beginning, but he still needed to cope with Tegyu in the current state. The guy remembered his promise, and after meeting with him, he was sure that he could be able to go out. However, Min-sun did not care. Even if they both die, he just wanted the apostle to keep his word. To date, Jin Chol was sitting in his office, thinking that the raid in Faju would begin soon. However, he too cannot sit idle, because he needs to find convincing evidence about Min-Sonia and Stardust. It seems that there is nothing to worry about, given the hunters that they participate in the raid. They were supported by the White Tiger, providing Min Ho. If something was unexpected, they have Choi Jung in stock and another S-rank hunter. That's just that brand new to Jin did not inspire confidence, and no one can know what was on his mind. He joined the Guild Reaper by the beginning of the raid, and how not to think that everything will turn out in favor of Min's son. However, the oddities do not end on this because Suo joined them as part of the Rudo moving detachment. The coincidence or fate, he personally approved his participation in the detachment, but doubts the correctness of this decision. If all this is part of his plan, then you need to help him, but also do not forget about the safety of his son Jin Woo. Meanwhile, the shock detachment has already encountered monsters tanks who breathe with fire, creating extra problems. The tank, which was very sweating from the heat of the flame, shouted to his comrades that he would not be enough at such a pace for a long time. But at the same moment Min Ho came to his aid, who knocked out a monster with her bare hands. The lizard tried to catch her, but she was too fast and frisky. Having bounced off the monster's body, she leaned into the wall to push her away from her and gained speed, destroying the lizard with one blow. After a couple of minutes, the hunter stood between the bodies of two defeated monsters, with whom she coped alone. Her gaze rushed to Min Sun, who did not even move her finger, and she was sorry that he was awakened by her ranges. While she was thinking about being a hunter for him, a joke, she did not notice how the monster jumped behind her. Minho turned too late and would not have time to dodge, but she suddenly came to her aid to Jean. The girl was shocked by his calm, while he advised her to continue to be more accurate. He cut down the salamander with one blow, came to the raid in everyday life, and initially seemed to her just a child, despite the S rank. S wrapped in a completely different level, because of which the guy with light movements of his hands decapitated new monsters. After a couple of minutes, they finished cleaning and coped with this before expected. However, Min wanted that there were too few monsters here, with which Min Sleep actively agreed. They carry out regular monitoring of the population of monsters in field dungeons, so they do not pose a threat. Usually, guilds do not care about this, since there is no need to go into the dungeon daily, which was embarrassed by the girl. She was sure that something strange was happening here, and Min Song indicated the path to the boss's room. It did not matter to him how diligently she was trying to sniff out something here, because they could not find anything compromising. The demons should have already demolished the factory and hide in the field dungeon without leaving evidence. So she will never find her traces and will not get out of here in her right mind, no matter how the opposite desired. Meanwhile, 3 demons only finished their training camp, gathering a small group of limp people. They were very sorry that they could not go to the apostle, who was so close to them. During this time, they will not be able to collect a lot of stardust, because firewood cannot cope with their task now. At the same time, Suhu stood in front of the door, where, as Beer said, the presence of demons was felt. Without thinking twice, the guy opened the doors, finding inside the 3 demons and people who looked like a zombie. The dumbfounded demon looked in his direction, but did not have time to say nothing, as he received a blow in the face. The monster flew a few meters, then dumbfounded the counterparts who did not understand what was happening here. Suo was in full combat readiness, preparing for the battle to the maximum, wanting to stop the demons. Now Beer watched the results of training the young master, who would take away the head of this monster. Everyone else was disconnected, as expected. A stardust factory was also in Faju. The demon, which seemed to be destroyed, did not think that the opponent of the great deeds of the apostle would burst here. The next second, he completely recovered, increasing slightly in size, and stated that he would be an excellent gift to the apostle. The ore. People were surprised at the huge number of crystals, because the dungeon is under the control of the guild. Also, they could not believe that the guild allowed E rank to enter this dungeon, although he was still a young man. But it was the boss who appointed a newcomer to work at the entrance to the dungeon, where it was safe, while he sent them to the front line. It seems that his cart can transport 4 times more ordinary, so they will help him as soon as they finish here. Meanwhile, Suhu stood in front of the 3 demons, who were surprised by the uninvited guest. Bier wanted to say something to the Lord, but he interrupted him, because with an increase in the level of perception, he also felt this. The demon standing in front of him was at the level of an A-rank hunter, like Randolph from a pyramid. The association should have some reason to send the guild to clean the field-type dungeon, so that he joined the team of collectors. Perhaps they learned about Stardust and became interested in Minsonia. Then it would be more difficult for him to get information. He asked the demon where the apostle is now, but he hunts him in the same way as the apostle hunts for a guy. The monster promised that soon they would meet, but before he would break all the bones to him and deprive him of oxygen. The guy could not avoid strong embrace his tentacles who enveloped his body, but he did not give in mind. He remembered how he could independently go through the brutal training of Ameth in just 5 days. His body definitely became stronger, and the loads that he could withstand increased several times. When the training came to an end, the happy guy simply fell to the ground, his hands around. To invest all the glasses received from the hourly was a good solution. Besides, he received the skill increasing strength. At that time, Amut was absolutely sure that he was the strongest man of all he had ever seen. With these thoughts, the guy easily burst out of the tentacles, who seemed to become a prison for him. Now the indicator of his strength was 120, so he was confident in his abilities and rushed right on the demons. Coming close to one of them, he decided to ask again where the apostle Itaramov, thereby dumbfounding the monster. Instead of an answer, the demon decided to strike him, having swept several tentacles, merging together. However, Suo completely ignored this attempt, grabbing the demon by the head, after which he easily pulled it out. After that, he used a storm cut to cause him as much damage as possible. The demon felt an incredibly frightening aura, which he saw only once, and the guy decided to find out everything without his participation. Suo threw his head to eat it while the demon was sparing that he could not watch the picture that the apostle writes. But thanks to his help, they were able to destroy the Raider clan, even if it warmed his soul in the last seconds of life. Somewhere in the shadow dungeon, Ale tried to understand what happened because her body suddenly felt better. Meanwhile, Happy BR enjoyed the meal, but the octopus was chewing a little difficult, but did not become less tasty. Sue decided to quickly find out something about the apostle, but I had to wait until the ant heshes. As it turned out, in the eyes of this demon, the Apostle Itaram was like a bright light, but he could not find out any details. They again were at a dead end, and only Min Sleep remains responsible for the production of stardust. But for starters, the guy had to bring people out of here because this battle could affect other hunters. Jin was surprised when he stopped feeling the presence of demons, suggesting that the association had a hand in this. After a couple of minutes, they reached the room of the boss of the field dungeon and stopped near the huge gate. Minho still did not find a single clue, although they had to produce stardust together. Min Song was pleased looking at her because the girl was sincerely surprised that it was absolutely clean. He advised to cancel the plan for washing the brain to Jin with a whisper, because it would be better if everything ends without problems. However, the apostle did not think so, while Min wanted to check again, but after the murder of the boss. When the girl directed everyone ahead, she did not notice that Min Sona turned pale when he heard the words of the apostle. The frightened man asked what he was doing, what the guy replied to what he was talking about this earlier. He's going to turn all the local hunters into followers, and right now he will begin with him. They can only take valuable allies, work with the S-Radius rank, a crazy idea from the very beginning. Therefore, he decided to use it to get to Taigu, which made the man startle in horror. Starting to listen to the chatter about the S-rank, Ming Sleep was terribly angry because he was sure that no one could wash his brains. But when he turned around, he realized that he was in some kind of space, and his mind was forced to listen to the will of the Almighty. Jin passed by a hypnotized hunter, deciding that now he could begin the next purpose. Meanwhile, Jung-in sat in the car, said that if the called creature disappears, it means that the team is in trouble. The call will help them control the situation, and they were able to solve the problem with the inability to use devices inside the dungeons. This was a great idea, but the man hoped that they would not have to intervene, and everything would go without any problems. Looking at Taigu, who was dressed in the form of a hunter, Jung-in decided that he was worried that Min would have a dream. However, the man was relatively calm and just waited for anything to go wrong. Ta Gyu suggested that Jung was jealous that the S-rank hunter preferred to join the Guild Reaper. However, the interlocutor began to deny this, because without him, there are enough very talented hunters. The head could not believe that Ming Sleep is responsible for the spread of an unknown stimulant, and he, as a chapter, should be responsible for this. If something really happens, he must keep his promise, and give Jung to the Union to understand himself. At this time, the shock detachment fought with a huge salamandra, which was the boss of this dungeon. Min did not notice that the S-rank is on the sidelines and leaves all the work on others, although they are senior for him. In addition, from the moment they entered the boss's room, Min Song suddenly began to fight without sparing strength. The apostle was sure that the star fragment that he gave Min Sun, even a hunter A-rank, could give an advantage. The man almost alone caused him significant damage, without substituting under the blow. However, the monster guessed time to catch a man, after which she turned sharply, waved his huge paw. It was a blow of incredible power, but Ming Sleep managed to expose a sword in front of itself to protect, thereby avoiding damage. It seems that a hunter of a rank is hard to fight at the level of the S rank with the only effect of the star fragment. Then he decided to use one of the 5 abilities of TL fragments, increasing the characteristics of unique features. She could strengthen even the faith of the creation of flame, stored in stardust, even unique features of weapons. She can increase the magical power of the hunter Min Sun, as well as the unique feature of the weapons that he owns. Now the apostle wanted to see whether his subordinate would be able to get the desired power of the S rank after gaining and strengthening. At this time, the boss saw that the man was immobilized, because of which he decided to deliver the last blow. But as soon as the monster approached him, Ming Sleep abruptly turned in his direction and used the cut skill. This blow was so strong that even Taegu and Zheng Ying noticed it, who immediately fixed their views to that place. Minho stunnedly looked from a man to a funnel in the ceiling, which he managed to do. It is difficult to evaluate the level of fatigue that occurs after the application of the amplification, but Ming Sleep was able to reach S rank for a short time. However, most of the increase in force has already disappeared, which suggests that it is not suitable for the power of S rank. The hunters watched the situation in shock, realizing that the A-rank hunter could not make such an attack. Stardust is ineffective for high-ranking hunters, which hinted at them about the existence of some other mana amplifier. While everyone was trying to pass this information, something happened that no one could expect. Min Dream pierced the body with a sword to Gin. Smiling madly, the man said that such as he could not wash his brains. However, he will let his damn power for the good, but here something similar will not be able to see. When he pulled out the sword, the hunter's body fell out lifelessly to the ground, while other hunters began to pull away. Minho could not believe that he could attack an ally, and most likely went crazy because of his doping. But Ming Dream did not listen to her, covering his face with his hand as the voices in his head did not shut up. Since by order of the association outside the S-rank hunters are waiting for, if he does not hurry, he will not get out at all. As soon as he decided to work, Minho gave everyone the order not to allow him to leave. The man rushed forward, demanding everyone to get out of the road, after which he began to force them for force. I hope to escape. They could not detain him even for a minute, and in addition to this received rather serious injuries. Li Chao immediately started up to give a signal to the S-rank hunters as soon as possible. The girl's eyes widened again when she turned her head and found that Jin was still alive. The apostle was surprised that a strong spirit was able to cope with the divine force of the generation of flame. Minho tried to find out how he could survive, because he was carried his heart with a blade in her eyes. Meanwhile, Ming's sleep fled at full speed. Although he found S-rank, now he was forced to run away with his tail. But now he has no one to rely on, neither on a damn alien, nor on the association, nor in the guild. His first decision was to hide in the next city, but at the same second, a blade appeared in front of his feet, which made him stop. A guy who heard the explosion began to come out of the tree, but he could not think that he himself would come to him. Suo immediately declared that he needed all the information about Stardust and the Apostle Iterim from him. He not only knows about Stardust, he also knows about the existence of the alien of the Apostle. If you think about it, they informed him that a person who has overcome Brookie has not violated the supply of material, is a black mask. However, the man was only worried that if he lingers here, the hunters will soon catch up with him. Judging by the magical power of the guy, he is not an equal to him, so Min Dream sharply rushed forward, directing his sword at him. Having instantly reacted, Sing grabbed the blade with his hand, dressed in a glove, taking it to the side. Min Song could not pull out the sword while the guy sharply waved his foot, hitting his chin. The man did not understand how this is possible, because he has much less magical power than him. BR noticed his surprise. The veteran of hunters is determined only by the number of mana that they possess. But the ant could feel true power, and thanks to the training of Ameth, the Lord pumped his strength to the maximum. And now he could easily compete with A-rank hunter because he could not cope with his physical abilities. Meanwhile, Minho continued to pose to Gin as he still managed to survive. And as soon as the apostle wanted to subjugate her mind to himself, someone sharply called her, thereby interfering with the plans of the guy. The girl with a smile greeted two S-rank hunters who arrived immediately as soon as they noticed an explosion. The disgruntled apostle watched them, but was sure that they had not yet to interfere with his plans. Minho immediately reported that this was the work of Ming Sona, and he had such an ability from somewhere. He exuded a tremendous amount of mana, as if the simulator was used, and also attacked the hunter before the Jin. Despite the injuries received, the hunter looked quite normal, although it was clear that his chest was pierced. The apostle retorted with a smile, explaining that he had the skill of healing, and therefore could survive. Young Inli became interested in the skill of a rather high level, but Minho advised them to catch up with Min Sona faster. At this pace, he will reach the city and will hide. So Young In reminded Taiji Yu of his promise. But when he turned around, he did not notice his comrade behind him, realizing that he decided to deal with him alone. The apostle still felt in touch with Min Sun and was still surprised that he could resist Vera. It is unlikely that anyone will believe his words, but if nothing to do, then he can begin to suspect him. You will have to get rid of him. Let it take a lot of holy power, but will take control of his body and make him commit suicide. He will always be able to get another hunter a rank, but as soon as he looked through Min Sona, he was surprised that he was already fighting. At first he suggested that the man still stumbled upon a S-rank hunter, but immediately recognized the guy in a black mask. He could not understand what he was doing here, suggesting that he, like the association, also haunts Min Sona. In this world, everything is always going on not according to plan, although before everything was performed in accordance with the word of God. But something inside him forced the apostle to smile. Perhaps it was an anticipation of the unknown. Meanwhile, Suho continued to sit on the enemy, who could not allow him to continue to delay himself. Suddenly, the man stopped him loudly, thereby surprising the guy who only got into the taste of the battle. Min Song decided to find out if he would let him go if he answers his questions, which made him doubt the proposal. The guy knew that they were in one apostles, but an embittered man explained that this geek betrayed him. Upon learning that something went wrong between them, Swan Ho asked why he helps him spread stardust. The point was that he promised to kill someone, although such a serious deal from the outside looked very ridiculous. After the great cataclysm, his whole life went awry, and the one who used to be anyone became a S-rank hunter. And now he began to look at him down. But so that he could continue to live in his life, he must die. The guy is the same alien to kill him, but Suho was sure that there would be enough words. Min Song was surprised that the guy did not want to kill him, despite the fact that he wants to capture their world. He reminded him of the most vile characters whom he had to play, who gives hopes, but devoid of personality. Also kind, lives within the framework of morality, imposed by society, but does not understand what he wants. After all, he did not get by pure accuracy his strength. He would forever remain a secondary character. However, he will fall into a situation where he will have to make a fateful decision, and he will suit him. At that moment, Ming was in the hands of the apostle, who forbade him to say anything. However, he was grateful, because with his help he achieved a lot. and takes his words back to his incompetence. Having decided to use it for the last time, the apostle chopped his hands, thereby destroying the personality of a man. At that moment, Min-sun's body began to shine incredibly brightly, emitting strange energy. It was the power of Itarim, incomparable with the one that Brochi had, at times superior. Suo stunnedly watched the metamorphosis of a person who began to take the appearance of another creature. The angel who appeared in front of him said that the attack on the factory is dust, the search for Min-sun, all in order to meet him. The apostle, which now owned Min-sona, was sure that they were similar to this with a saboteur in a black mask. The appearance of Min-sona suddenly changed, and given his words, we can conclude that the apostle is in front of the Su-ho. The angel was not surprised that he knew about their existence, as well as the gods who sent them here. Pointing to the guy with his sword, the apostle smugly added that he had arrived to declare their rights to this world. Thinking that because of them the father cannot return, the rage began to flare up inside the land. The guy was waiting for this moment for a very long time, because of which he rushed into the attack without unnecessary words. But as soon as he took a step, someone's imperious voice stopped them, and everything around was shook from raging energy. From this moment, they are not allowed to move without its permission, and if you move, their body will be sparkled. Turning his head, and did not notice the man who had already pulled nearby, directing the bow to the apostle, Taegu began to ask Min-sun what was happening to him and what he was doing all this time. The apostle ignored him, after which he concluded that here they would no longer talk, which surprised the guy. He invited him to meet at the highest point of this region, after which he turned around, deciding to leave. However, Taegu decided differently, because he forbade him to move, after which he released the arrow towards the apostle. Turning sharply, the angel missed the arrow past himself, dodging her with extraordinary ease. After that, he soared into the air, while a man prepared 3 more arrows to send them after. The apostle easily dodged from each issued shell, moving farther away from the hunter. Meanwhile, Suho also tried to return from every arrow, which for some reason flew in his direction. Taegyu also came from Min-sona, and judging by his reaction, he has nothing to do with the apostle. In addition, he has not yet shown his true power, because they were still able to dodge his arrows. But now for the hunter, the most important thing was to defeat Min-sun, and you cannot think about the second hunter. He believed that it would be selfishly from him to try to grab him unharmed, and therefore decided not to spare his strength. The apostle tensed when he felt a dangerous magical force emanating from the S-rank hunter. Sensing something was amiss, the man turned around and directed the bow to the goblin, which looked from behind the bushes. The man was surprised to raise the commas from where the goblin was here, after which he realized that it was a distracting maneuver. The same second, he decided to report on everything Jin Chol, who was supposed to find out that Min was a dream, disappeared. He apologized for his miss. I assumed that the appearance of Min-sun was transformed under the influence of substances. He also noticed that there was a hunter in a black mask with him, but it is not known whether they were allies or not. Young-in, hearing this, and decided to ask if this hunter is fought for hand-to-hand, which surprised Taegu. It was a hunter whom he saw at the airport. He was also in a black mask, and fought alone with black monsters. Jin Chol for a second thought that the missing dream Jin Woo had returned, but he would quickly deal with them. Meanwhile, Su-ho appeared on the mountain, where the apostle called him, slowly approaching him. First of all, the angel was surprised that the guy decided to help him run away from a high-ranking hunter. But he was going to escape, leaving Min-sun's body as soon as he smells fried. The apostle heard from the demons that darkness is a creature known in this world as a shadow monarch. He was interested in what connected him with him. He was too curious, and Su is not going to spoil this, and better crush him, receiving the necessary information. Beer warned him, because after the apostle captured this body, he cannot comprehend the scale of his strength. The guy asked him not to worry, because he prepared something specifically for such an occasion. The next second, he began to call on the shadows that in an instant appeared behind him. Looking at this picture again, the apostle was sure that he watched the same power of darkness in the war. Now Suo called the most powerful monsters, which he had previously been able to win, so that they would help him in the battle. These were all the strongest corpses that he was able to save for this day, and now they finally came in handy. After that, he invited the apostle to fight in full force, at the same time united with Rocky. This has already appeared a new urgent quest that demanded to destroy the apostle and get his memories. Suo met this quest with dignity because it seems it became honestly, he will have to kill a man. Suddenly, the apostle felt a strange change with the awareness of his internal emotions. Memories of the main body remained about the fragment, and it seems that he knows what a meeting with darkness is. Curiosity to someone so strong, a powerful creature who is able to stop the army of other universes alone. He really wanted to find out about the darkness that was at the head, and was sure that the guy could satisfy his curiosity. At the same second, huge snakes rushed at the apostle, which decided to first strike. Following him, other monsters headed, which the angel cut with incredible ease. However, it was only a distracting maneuver, and when the shadows dispersed, the Su tried to hit the opponent in the forehead. The apostle realized that he was a close-up fighter, uses a soldier like a bait, and he attacks him. However, a strong wave of the sword, the angel in one moment increased the distance with the guy. Meanwhile, Isla, who waited for a convenient moment, decided to attack him from the back, grabbing the spear tightly. The apostle was enough to tilt his head to fend off the attack, after which he simply intercepted the spear. He noticed that she was not from black soldiers, and at that very moment he realized that he had been distracted, receiving from his feet on the face from the land. This did not cause him special damage, but forced him to wonder why he does not use the black army. The guy decided to fix it, after which someone sharply grabbed the apostle by the hands, preventing him from butting. It was a former boss of the pyramid, which began to envelop an angel in the sand, completely paralyzing it. While the apostle's body was covered with sand, Su concentrated energy in his hand to attack. The enemy did not even attempt to get out, deciding to take the guy's blow and check his strength. Moving back, Suho was surprised to notice that the sand holding him exploded, which should not be. The apostle decided that he could no longer experience their acute sensations, after which he attacked the guy through the veil of dust. At that very moment, the rest of the team, including the Shadow Army, you were dark and trained warriors, each with his will. He seemed to fight with a disciplined army. And his strength resembles darkness only externally. We can safely say that they have completely different abilities. The guy had such a power in his hands, and he is not even able to apply it in battle, for which he paid. After the apostle took possession of these men, he became much stronger, and his strength at the level of S rank. With these thoughts, Su found that the angel decided to rush into the attack, wanting to destroy him. The apostle said that he looked lonely because no one in this world could stand on equal terms with darkness. No one can understand such a powerful essence, but Su was surprised that his father was lonely. As soon as he tried to block the blow of the apostle, the gloves of the horn of the volcano immediately scattered into small fragments. Looking at his hands dumbfounded, the guy missed another blow, and this time the apostle thrust the blade into his stomach. The apostle was sure that his nature did not deserve such colossal forces, so he would take the power of darkness, which the guy owns. He wants to turn him to his faith and direct his abilities for good, so he will be able to feel the feelings of darkness. Suo grabbed the blade, unable to believe that he does not deserve such power because she belongs to his father. Suddenly, the guy remembered that Ming Sleep told him something similar before contacting the apostle. He needed something more than the characteristics and ability to become stronger. Previously, he was thinking about fighting more effectively using shadow weapons. However, in addition to this, he uses many other skills, but Beer was sure that all his geniuses like him is all forced. However, the father never used changes in the form, and there should be some kind of good reason for this. But now he thought that he was too easily driven into the framework that he created for himself. The habit of compromising after failure, even after awakening, stayed with him. And since he was awakened, he has never painted the paintings. Although he definitely liked it, everything was said by Min Dream. To rely on the system to meet with his father, and to become stronger to find his mother, the system itself gave these reasons to him. Well, why did he try to follow in the footsteps of his father all this time, who did not need an exact copy? He needs to find what he can, what only he is capable of. Only then his real power will manifest. Raising his hand, the guy gave the command to rebel, which surprised the apostle, because he was mortally wounded by a blade. The angel thought that due to the resurrection, the black soldiers are immortal, which made them problematic opponents. But his warriors are even useless with such force. But now something strange began to happen. The apostle watched the shadows begin to merge with each other, but he did not see anything like this, even in the war with darkness. At that very moment, a chimera appeared in front of the angel, while Rocky decided to separate from the body of Su-Ho. A black mask began to appear on the guy's face, and his eyes lit up, because now he was ready to turn the course of the battle. Suo remembered how in childhood he said that he would be a police officer, like a dad, because he was very cool. Or he had an option to become an athlete as a mother, because of which he will be able to run as quickly as she is. Then he NBA stroked him on the head and said that when he was born, his mother and dad decided something. They will never affect his dreams, and he can do as he himself wants. If this was his dream, he can strive for her, but you need to ask yourself more often whether it really is what he wants. He did not know why he suddenly remembered his mother's words, but instead of questions, he only blindly followed the path of his father. At the university, Lim told him that if you draw the same thing, his skills would not improve. But this was small changes. People focusing on the same topic tend to drive themselves into the framework, but the more he draws, the freer his performance. This was especially true for the current picture, because what was depicted on canvas is even difficult to call ants. He probably received a shadow change in the form earlier, because the system adapts to its features. You can't resist it anymore. The battle style, actively involving shadow changes, led him to create a free shadow. Beer was surprised that the closest shadow soldiers were attracted to the young master, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain their own shape. Catching him in his hand, Isle began to ask him what was happening to him and the shadows around him. However, the ant did not even understand what happened specifically to him, but he had one theory. Apparently, the young lord awakens, finding what his true power is. The apostle, looking at the unfolding picture, thought that there was hidden potential in it. This can cause problems. You need to bring it to a dying state as soon as possible and apply a star fragment. But as soon as he wanted to do this, Suyu released the shadows from his body, which forced the angel to retreat. The apostle could not understand what was happening because he knew that the hunters could not become stronger, after which he decided that the guy had tried it. At this time, early from the blade on the body of the land began to quickly drag on, not even leaving scars, and its shadows became gloves. The guy began to wonder about the shadow change in the form, which could only turn the shadows into the weapon. Given the features of the shadows that allow them to transform, it can use them in various ways. At this time, the apostle actively repelled the attacks of other shadows that fell upon him from all sides. The huge orc tried to attack him from the back, but the shadow soldiers did not pose a danger to him. Suddenly, he noticed a guy heading for him, who decided to use his last trump card. The system notified that a demonic blow was activated, which began to drink his aile. Suddenly breaking off, the land rushed straight at the apostle, wanting to face him forehead. The magical power began to be more dangerous, but the apostle could not miss such an obvious attack. He began to wave the blade, leaving a bunch of deep wounds on the guy's body, which were supposed to weaken him. The absence of one leg should not affect his strength, but he still poses a danger. Suddenly, Suo created a new shadow in front of him, and the apostle did not expect that with a shadow change in form, and this is possible. Taking advantage of his hitch, the soldier inflicted a very serious blow to him, which smashed into the chips a rock with the body of an angel. Before Jean, who had blood began to go from his forehead, could not expect that the guy would give his ability to a soldier. It was a force that he did not even see in the darkness, which made him get scared for a second. Now he could not say a word. It seems that Min-sun had a jaw. However, the body is still mobile. If it transforms vitality into mana, it will last a little more. But at the same moment, the apostle felt something was amiss, trying to understand that it was a jerk with him. Perhaps the recent blow canceled the effect of submission, because of which the mind of Minsona began to return to him. At that very moment, an internal dialogue arose between the apostle and the man, in which the second stated that he was not afraid of death. He hated it when he looked down on him, but he hates even more when he was underestimated. If he can complicate the life of the freaks that they look at him from top to bottom, then he will certainly do it. He asked the guy to approach, because if he was not destined to become the main character, then he will play the role that he is destined. When the effect of submission began to finally collapse, Ming Sleep decided to complete his career in the role of the villain. At this time, Su Wanted went purposefully to him to complete this battle in his favor. Min Dream did not have time to react to a fist that the guy directed him in his chest, where his heart was. This was enough to pierce the body of the monster with his bare hands through, forcing him to writhe in pain. The problem of Min Sun was not only in a perforated stomach because of a broken jaw, he cannot even pronounce the last word. When the alien appeared before him, he thought he got the opportunity to change the world, but everything ended in this way. From the very cataclysm, his life was a complete shit, and even on his deathbed, he recalls Taegu. He demanded that he would not look down on him, because he is a superstar Lee Min Sleep. But when he raised his head, who noticed that the puppy's eyes that looked at him were full of pity. When the man fell dead, the system notified the completion of the quest, accruing the UN level. At that very moment, joyful comrades ran up to him, who congratulated him on the victory over the apostle. However, the guy clearly realized that Ming Sleep, not the apostle, was laughing last, and he could not talk to him. However, he seemed to him a man, true to his principles, and now he was shocked because of the murder of man. Thanks to him, he realized something important for which he is grateful to this person, although he was his enemy. Having become a player, he gained a goal, find a mother and help his father, but lost sight of his own meaning of life. That is why Ming Sleep called him a character, completely devoid of personality, because he always tried only to imitate. And then he dawned on him, fighting his father at the end of his studies, he revered him in front of him, and therefore could not win. But at the same time, a fierce desire to defeat him aggravated disappointment from defeat. Since his father was felt so unattainable and incredible, he feels that he must do what he had never thought about. In the end, to be ambitious, but there is still a lot of work ahead. After that, Suho raised his index finger up, proudly stated that he wanted to become the strongest. His goal was to become stronger than the Apostle Iterum, monarchs, and even surpass his own father. It was a new person that he chose for himself, because of which the comrades looked at the master with enthusiasm. However, they replied that this goal was unattainable, because there is no one stronger than the dream of Jin Woo, for which the guy thanked them. It was not surprising that they thought so, but now Singo decided to be distracted and check the awards. Suddenly, the guy discovered that the system offers him a quest to replace the class upon reaching a 40 level. With surprise, having reviewed his characteristics, he was delighted that he could finally find a class. At this time, the apostle watched him from a distance of several kilometers, frozen in the air. Jin admitted that this time he was blurring because he could not think that the black mask had such a potential. One of the abilities of the main body, which he gained, united with fragments, is the scales of equal exchange. They allow you to exchange it for the same value that was a very dangerous weapon. Therefore, he will exchange the vitality of the closest followers of faith for Manu. Everything was exactly as he expected, and therefore created an energy onion, using a stone of submission instead of an arrow. At this time, Beer suggested looking for Min-sun in memory of the memories of the Apostle Itarim. Suu thought that after the cataclysm this man hated the whole world, wanting to return it. Suddenly he felt a sharp pain. He was pierced by a stone sent by the Apostle, who was stuck inside the body. The guy did not understand where the attack came from, because he did not feel nearby of anyone's presence. Meanwhile, the Apostle, who was quite far away, found that the goal was achieved. When the stone began to become activated, the Su published a heart-rending cry, and his shadows began to leave the body. At that very moment, there was a feeling that something was penetrating his head, and the system tried to eliminate the negative effect. The Apostle was sure that thanks to this, the power of darkness was already in their hands, because the system could not cope with this. However, to his surprise, the appeal stopped when the system after another attempt was able to dispel the negative effect. Su was glad that longevity turned on so on time, but now it was necessary to close the wound with shadows. He was obliged to do this because his health points continued to fall incredibly quickly. Before the meter sank to 1, he managed to accept something, clicking on the next notice. As it turned out, the guy accepted the quest to change the class, after which the portal opened in front of him. Only the player could enter the gates of the quest, and the allies had to be sent to the shadow dungeon. During the movement, the guy did not see or hear anything, but because of the pain he could understand that he was still alive. Suddenly he saw the light of blue flame, which proceeded from a torch chaffing the wall. At that very moment, the eyes of Su expanded with fear when he recognized the place in which he was, because he was here earlier. At this time, the Apostle waited until everyone disappeared, after which he landed near Min-sun. He did not feel the mana nearby, and the portal that appeared from nowhere took the black mask and his soldier. However, Min-dream still remained here. It turns out that only his subjects can use the portals. Each time they meet them, they throw something out of the ordinary, which interested him very much. Meanwhile, Su decided to get slightly before starting the testing of class. He noticed that upon arrival here, a hole in his stomach was healed, and the rest of the body is in perfect order. But notifications stated that the heirs of the monarchs could not take part in the quest to change the class. And also he could not use the shadow dungeon key, which very limited the guy in opportunities. Then he raised his head, recognizing the place in which he was trained, but last time all this turned out to be a dream. It was a dungeon that his father created specifically for him, not the memories of these times were still with him. However, now he does not see the knights in whom it would be possible to earn experience, and he was not given weapons. Now he did not even see the description of the quest, and now he needed to somehow climb the top of the tower without weapons and communication skills. Suddenly he noticed that this place is now reminiscent of a labyrinth. He looks familiar. Something is still wrong. Some places were all distorted by him, such as torches, which seemed to be buggy. At that very moment, he was surprised to notice the gates, which were located near him. It is strange that the room with the boss was located right in the middle of the corridor, as if the quest for changes in the class had made on dumps. Su felt excitement, after which he sighed loudly and began to slowly open the gates. He thought that if the quest completes, he could become as strong as then. In training, he was the first to meet a knight who was an incredibly complicated opponent for an inexperienced land. There was impenetrable darkness inside the room, but he felt that there was clearly someone here. When the guy came closer, a shock appeared on his face, because he did not expect to see something like that. Right in front of him, a guy rose from the throne, heading in his direction. It was a land of training. A frightened guy could not believe that he needed to fight with himself from the past, but then he even could defeat Bara. At that very moment, his double waved his hand, because of which the earth immediately began to walk with a shaking, quickly destroying. Seeing that the enemy had lost his balance, the past Su immediately rushed into the attack, taking advantage of the moment. The dumbfounded guy wanted to stop him, but it was too late, and the double literally destroyed him. At this time, one of the 3 torches went out, which meant that Suu had only 2 attempts to pass. When the guy woke up, he jumped sharply, remembering at the last moment before a terrible death. He woke up inside the boss's room, which meant that he needed to defeat the version of himself from the past. Su did not know whether it was possible, but if the goal of the system is to make it stronger, then the method should definitely be. Unlike training, many new aisles appeared in the dungeon, given the strange location of the boss room. Wandering along the corridors, the guy noticed that in the maze there were other gates that he did not risk open. Caught in front of the next doors, he stopped, finding another boss's room. Su decided not to load himself too much, because so that it was not there. It is better than it from the past. Having opened the doors, the guy was surprised to find children's toys scattered everywhere. In the middle of them, a child, who was him, was sitting, and now he raised one of the toys with the help of telekinesis. Su, Ho was frightened when he saw the child's gaze, trying to understand what was happening in this dungeon. He could not believe that he would have to fight his children's version, because the battle with the child is something dishonest. Suddenly he felt that he could not move, and all the toys immediately soared into the air with the child. When the guy died once again, the next torch went out, depriving him of another life. When he was awakened, he immediately began to rub the neck, which the child had just turned the rule of the ruler for him. It was an instant death, and with its current preparation, it is impossible to defeat any of them. Suddenly he remembered that 3 lives were given to him in training, and now he had already died twice. At first he thought that he had the last one left, but immediately discovered a huge wall covered with torches. Suddenly the system gave a mistake, asking the player to defeat the essence on the other side of the gate until the life allotted to him ends. A system error arose due to the hit of the material world, and it cannot leave the dungeon until it ends the quest. Looking upstairs, Suho could not believe that all these torches were the number of his lives that were given to him for passing. But the problem is that in this place there is no way to increase the level, and everything will have to be done by current forces. The reason why he was given such an irrational task is closely related to an error in the system. In this case, there is no guarantee that these lights represent the number of lives that he has. However, now he cannot give up, because his only choice is to move forward. It was a new place, passages that seem random, and the rooms of the bosses that appear out of nowhere. It is highly likely that there are other boss rooms, and it is not known how large this labyrinth is. The guy had a lot of time, so you can spend some of its amounts on search and study. Suddenly, he drew attention to the dark part of the corridor, felt in someone else's sinister presence. At the same second, toys that soared in the air began to appear in front of the darkness, and then the child. Suo could not understand what he was doing here. He probably went out into the corridor through the open door. However, now there was no time to think. He needed to run as quickly as possible, but then his legs pierced something. Feeling an incredible pain, the guy fell, noticing in front of him a toy dinosaur, which caused him this damage. Suho, in shock, realized that his leg was torn to pieces by an ordinary toy, which looked extremely dangerous. However, all this happened only from the fact that, with the help of the rule of the ruler, she was able to gain such speed. With every second, it was more difficult to answer the question of how he was able to completely fulfill this quest. Suddenly, the guy felt that someone had come from behind. Turning around, he saw himself from the first room. His last thought was that it was absurd, but the next second he was immediately attacked. Having revived, Suho was indignant that the bosses wandering along the corridors are cheating, which complicates the task. But if he is still alive, this means that all these many days represent the number of remaining lives. He does not need to fight them, and you need to continue to challenge them to find a new room. However, no matter how many times he meets about his opponents, he was literally erased in powder in the shortest possible time. He was dying many times, but it was nothing, because at the moment he had an inconsistent number of lives. If he continues to challenge endlessly, he will certainly find another door to the boss room. But it could have been such that another boss may not exist due to the error of the system, despite immortality. There were enemies whom he could not defeat, as well as the inability to raise the level, made this place similar to hell. Suddenly, the guy remembered his own words, which he told his comrades that he wanted to become the strongest. These words became his chains that make him move, but now it was necessary to come up with a plan. Having bitten his finger, Singh decided to draw a maze with his blood. Every time it will find new moves. Now it could become a riddle for the fulfillment of the quest, so it must do everything in his power. Meanwhile, the news said that the association banned Stardust as it influenced the memory of hunters. The hunters who used it are now undergoing examinations to withdraw it from the body. The guild leader is a gloomy reaper, which was in the center of the spread of Stardust, was found dead at the foot of the mountain. The former celebrity, known as the hero of the hunters, shocked the world when his crimes were disclosed. Taigu, who was the leader of the guild, and observed the news that it was completely his fault. If then he had not missed Min Sun, this would not have happened, but he was asked not to blame himself. But the man added that there are several more things that bother him, because the appearance of Min Sun did not correspond to him. Young Enos frowned, suggesting that it could be a skill created using Stardust. Tae Gyu's Lilo that he could not accurately answer this question, but he did not deny such opportunities. A hunter in a black mask who fought with him was also noticed, and he was someone who killed Min Sona. Young Ning suddenly recalled that one of the miners who joined the group suddenly went missing. Then he took out a photograph of Suho, explaining that this is a Hunter D rank, but there is an opportunity that this person is a falsaran. Tae Gyu asked to carefully examine his appearance, after which he was handed over to the photograph. Without wasting time, the leader of the guild handed this photograph to the hunter to Jean, who was in the office with them. At this time, Jean Chol thought that it was highly likely that there is a suite in a black mask, but it was strange that he disappeared again, because of which the man mentally asked Jin Woo what was happening to his son. At this time, Suo looked at the huge map of the labyrinth, which he painted with his blood. Having carefully studied her, the guy slowly got up, wanting to continue his journey because before the end of the quest was still far away.